Jackie Clayton, and Mayor Given, of course. Also in the room we have Councillors Dylan Bressey, Kevin O'Toole, Yod Minhas, Eunice Friesen, and Chris Thiessen, as well as Corporate Services Director Shane Burke. All right, we'll start this meeting with the Director Service Area Update. Director Miller.
Right, thanks, Chair Blackburn. So I'll just start off with the Community Knowledge Campus. And just recently we increased the fitness center and track and allowing the time frames to go from 60 minutes to 90 minutes, which was really well received by our clients. They appreciated the extra time to enjoy fitness activities. And then with events and entertainment, with Revolution Place, we recently hosted Tinseltown Trade Show. It was held in the Bose Event Center over the weekend. And we had a process where the guests were ushered in and they were given 1 hour time slots to look at the show. And we had a maximum of 100 people at one time in the facility. So well within, or following the AHS guidelines, of course. Then at Day Bar, I just wanted to report to committee that the first month of our results are in with using the Real Ice system. This is a cold water application system versus using hot water. So the estimate for cost savings for just the month of October is about $2,800, which is about 2.1% of compared to last year. So that's good news. And our intent is to start off at Day Bar and then if it works out well to expand it to other arenas in the community as well. And then with Fleet, just we have some new equipment arriving, a new crawler for the snow dump, and then also 3 new loaders expected to arrive in the next month. And then Fleet is also busy they're working on the spring and the summer equipment now that it's parked and to make sure it's ready for when spring does hit us in a few months' time. And with Sports Development, Wellness and Culture, they're developing a toolkit to guide the community in planning neighborhood events such as Winter Blast. It's similar to the Neighborhood Day, and this year's event will consist of a scavenger hunt, which will encourage residents to be active in their neighborhood following guidelines as well. And then finally with Transit, our annual Stuff a Bus campaign kicked off November 13th with an initial good response. And then the additional events are planned for November 28th and then December 11th to the 14th. And that's my report, Mr. Chair, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Miller? Seeing none, thank you very much for that. And we'll move on to the item 2.1, which is correspondence from the town of Wembley. And I believe, Director Miller, that you've got something to say about that as well.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my plan was to have Mr. Harvard join us this morning, but he was having some computer difficulties. But so in regards to the correspondence, we understand this letter was also sent to the other municipalities in the region. And we were anticipating that this was coming forward for further discussion with administration and with elected officials. So what our plan is to, we're willing to get involved with the discussion if that's what committee and council would direct us to do. And then at some point in the future, depending on how the discussion goes with the other municipalities, our plan is to bring a report back to committee with a recommendation on how this could look with a regional handy bus throughout the region. So,
thank you. Any questions for Director Miller on this? Mayor Given and then Councillor Bressey.
Sure. Thanks very much, Chair Blackburn. So, Director Miller, what kind of direction would you be seeking from committee? Is it, directing administration to work with the other regional municipalities to explore the feasibility? I guess we already have done a feasibility study, so I'm not sure it's exploring feasibility anymore. I'm just would like some clarification on what would be useful direction for administration on this.
Okay. Through the chair, so I think just simply what you said, just to direct us to work with the other municipalities, with the administration, and then to bring back the results of the discussions to committee in the future with a recommendation perhaps as to if we or what our role could be with a regional handy bus.
Thank you.
Sir Bressey.
Great, thank you. I'm just curious, I know that we're also in the process of procuring or about to start the process of procuring on-demand software. Is the products we're looking at, would they be capable of a regional approach, or would this, if we were going regional or not regional, would that have any impact on what software we might decide to go with?
Through the chair, that would be a very good question for Mr. Harvard. I think I know he's looked into different aspects of the software program and how it could work for us, but that's a very good point, and I'll have a conversation with him to see if we can include that with the new software.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Would somebody like to make a motion to direct the administration? Thank you, Mayor Gibbon.
Sure. Thanks, Chair Blackburn. So I'd move that the committee direct administration work with regional municipalities to examine the results of the regional handy bus feasibility study and report back to committee with recommendations at a future meeting.
Thank you. Any discussion on the proposed motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous in favor. With that, we have no other business. We're not doing any policy review today, and so we can go to the outstanding items list. You're on again, Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have one item on the list, 1128, and so my intent there is I'd like to change the person or the name as to who will be responsible for the report. If we could change it to Catherine Ridgway, please. And then this is a 2022 project, but so our plan is to bring it forward in probably late spring of 21. I see we also need to change the expected report date. It says 2022, but it should be June 1st, 2021.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to accept the outstanding items list as amended? Thank you, Councillor Clayton. Those in favor? And that passes unanimously, and that brings to a close our Community Services Committee meeting. I'm not sure who's up next.
Councillor Claus up next.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. So we'll next move into the Protective and Social Services Committee agenda. On this committee is myself, Councillor Friesen, Councillors O'Toole, and Mayor Gibbon. So we'll start off with our item 1.1, our Director's Service Update. And we'll start with Director Manuel, please.
Okay, good morning, committee. This morning you're going to hear quarterly updates from several of our departments, so I'll keep the director update brief. But the Youth Advisory Committee held its introductory session to its new membership on the 18th. There's currently 8 seats filled, and 2 more applications are coming forward to council in December. Collaborating with Northwest Regional FCSS departments to put together advocacy points for respective councils to send to MLAs as GOA undergoes its FCSS program review. And in enforcement services, work is underway to present a newly written and consolidated use of public lands bylaw that should be coming forward to CLT in December potentially, and probably council shortly thereafter. Enforcement services continues to sweep the abandoned vehicles throughout the city to ensure that the streets are clear for snow clearing. In the fire department, they report that the 911 system for Northern Rockies has been configured. So this is the area of Fort Nelson, I believe. And we're currently doing test calls into the GP 911 center. And it is anticipated the service will be live by the end of this year. In the RCMP, December is Impaired Driving Month. So 10 check stop initiatives have been planned with a target of 3,000 vehicle contacts. Stats will be reported to the media shortly after in early January. Additionally, the RCMP had a number of initiatives that resulted in significant arrests and seizures that I'm sure Superintendent Curry will speak to maybe in greater detail in a moment. But that's TSS in a nutshell.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions for Director Manuel? Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Chair Pilat. Director Manuel, just have a question. Last week, the City of Edmonton put out a request for more information on the cases surrounding COVID-19 and coronavirus. It was in the CBC News that they just weren't getting all the data that they needed in order to make decisions. And I was wondering if it might be possible for us, with the rising cases of coronavirus in the region and the city, for us to get an understanding on what our ICU capacity is at and the number of hospitalizations regionally, and to have a continued dialogue with Alberta Health Services in order to understand what is going on in the context of the Grande Prairie region and largely in the realm of decision making, our ability to make good decisions and to help contribute to the overall health of our community. What is the opportunities for us to get those updates fed into council consistently, maybe even on a weekly basis, seeing as we may be going into a lockdown here soon?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Well, certainly administration would be pleased to provide that information to council if it was available to ourselves. Unfortunately, to date, we haven't been successful at obtaining that in any sort of regular interval, and very limited at all, I guess. Information flow has been deemed by Alberta Health Services to be particularly patient sensitive, and even those high level numbers have been they've been reluctant to release even those high level numbers to us.
Okay, now is there an opportunity maybe through motion that the City of Grande Prairie can direct administration to engage in this dialogue with them and maybe get a letter or something, or to write a letter from the mayor to encourage Alberta Health Services to share that? We're not asking for patient details. We just want to know, or at least I want to know, and I want to know if council wants to know, the number of ICU beds that are being taken in, the number of hospitalizations. I know that we have a direct line with Dr. Catherine Koliaska, which helps out with the region. So maybe there's an opportunity there. I don't think this goes beyond our capacity or our ability to request information on the behalf and in the best interest of our community. Do you think that might work in achieving some kind of, I guess, end game or more knowledge for our council to be able to make decisions around COVID?
So in response to the question, certainly I think what I'll do is we have a municipal liaison within the Alberta Health Services Emergency Operations Center for the North Region. That does report up to the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the region. So I think we will make the specific request you've made in writing to them based on the response that we receive or don't receive. It would then probably be appropriate that I report back to council, and if the information is not what council had requested, or if it's not available to us, it'd be prudent at that point probably to write a letter, direct the mayor to write a letter to the minister requesting such information be made available.
Okay, now thanks for that, Chris. I don't have the ability to make a motion on this committee, but would it be helpful for us to direct administration to do that, or to direct the mayor to write a letter? Or would administration just move forward with this and provide updates to council?
I see just...
Well, I certainly understand. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Director Manuel, I just see Mayor Gibbon wanted to jump in the queue here.
Yeah, I think the most direct way would be direct administration to report back. I think the letter writing approach, if committee directs, the mayor write a letter, that actually is a recommendation to the next council meeting. And then after that council meeting, the letter gets written, and then it goes to the minister's office, and then it goes, so, that process will be a lot longer than maybe asking administration to do research, find out what information is available and report back to council either by email or verbally as soon as possible. I think that would make a lot more sense, but in terms of establishing what we can and can't get in a better timeline. I think the letter writing campaign will move too slowly for this kind of information.
Any other, Councillor Bressey?
Thank you. I think it's great if administration is going to work at the administrative level to get more information, great. But I'd also just point out that at the political level, we've been asking for 6 months to MLAs and cabinet members, hey, we need this. I think I wouldn't support a letter asking. I think I'm at the point that if we're going to say politically, we just need to make a firm statement flat out. You are downloading decisions to municipalities and not giving them the information that they need to make good decisions. I think that it's time to make a firm statement. We've been asking for months since this pandemic, and frankly, the province has abdicated its responsibility to give us the information we need if it's going to expect us to make decisions. And I think we should state that bluntly if we're going to get politically involved in this.
I'll jump in as I see no other hands up. I feel the same way about it. I mean, we hear lots in our community about what's going on, but we actually don't know what's going on. So I would be, I'd be happy if somebody would put a motion on, because I do think we're kind of past the point of, we've been asking this for an awfully long time, and and maybe we didn't do it formally or the right channels, but we have been asking for this information for quite a long time. Also, I think if we're going to be looking at that information, one of the things that also like to see in there is what's happening with our suicide rates and some of the other unintended consequences of COVID right now. Just because I'd like to know, I'm hearing from the community that suicides are way up. I actually don't know if they're way up. Whether they are or not, we don't know. And I think those are important data and important information for our community to understand the overall impacts of COVID. It's really easy to see cases and it's easy to see death rates by COVID, but it'd be interesting to see in context how this is affecting the overall healthcare system. So I would love to see somebody put a motion forward. I'm not in a position to do that. So if somebody else on our committee would be interested, that would be great.
So I'm not quite sure, Councillor Pilat, so were you sort of speaking in support of the directing administration approach or the statement approach? On the statement approach, I'm not quite sure I have a motion ready to be able to do that.
I think from an information approach, I just think that there's more information than maybe what was being asked from Councillor Thiessen and Councillor Bressey. I also think it's important that we understand what's happening with our suicide rates in our local context here as well. So that's just further context that I'd like to see we ask for. I'm fine with administration asking. I just think it needs to start being maybe more public that our council wants to know this information. And we've talked about it, but we haven't really formalized it, I guess. And so I think it's time that we maybe formalize it. So, Councillor Bressey?
Yeah, and I think there are kind of two separate questions. There is the question about what's going on with ICU that only AHS has, but also the province has done a good job of releasing suicide stats province-wide and opioid overdose responses. And I know that I've heard, hey, our suicides are way up, our overdoses are way up. Actually, from the information that I've seen coming from the province, suicide rates in the province are actually down. And overdoses have been up province-wide, although a lot of that was southern Alberta, which my understanding was largely related to a lot of bad batches that we didn't see coming through Grande Prairie. I know from my work with the Opioid Response Task Force, we've actually seen locally overdoses go down, and that's information that is available, but I don't know if it's readily available. You have to go digging for it. So I think it's a separate question than ICU, but I think our administration probably would be able to get some information about suicides and overdoses. And yeah, if we want that more readily available to the public, I think that might be a good motion for a committee to make, but I think it's a separate motion.
See, nobody wanting to make a motion, unfortunately, on that, which is a little disheartening. Oh, sorry, I guess Mayor Given.
So, Councillor Pilat, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm imagining it exactly the same way as Councillor Bressey, or at least I'm not conceptualizing it the same way. So I'll try a motion, and I'm happy. I think we're all working towards the same intent, so I'm happy to massage it collectively. So I'd move that the committee direct administration work with Alberta Health Services to establish more information, to provide more information to council as soon as possible with respect to utilization of local healthcare resources, period. And that's the part that I'm having a bit more of a challenge with, is this other part about making a statement about all the other data. I'm gonna leave my motion at that where I said period. I think that's where I'll end. It does say local healthcare resources. That's fairly broad and would give administration an opportunity to inquire about some of those other areas like suicides or if there's other data that's available. The only other thing that I could think that council might want to discuss is, my motion is directing administration to provide that back to council as soon as possible. Maybe there's a follow-up motion or a second motion to request a presentation at the next possible public council meeting of that information. And so, that would be a request to have a representative from Alberta Health Services come and explain what they're seeing at a public council meeting. But for right now, I think I'm most confident in the first part of that motion. That's the best way that I can kind of imagine it right now.
No, appreciate that. Thanks for that, Mayor Given. Councillor Thiessen and Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. Thank you, Chair Pilat. I wonder if perhaps the mayor's motion is too broad in the context of the data that we need. My concern is that we'd get a big report on healthcare capacity, but we might not get the ICU updates or the hospitalizations. And I wonder if we may have to be specific in the motion about requesting those numbers. But open for discussion, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that in my motion, I'd like to say utilization of healthcare resources as a result of COVID-19. Just to make it more specific, I mean, we're not looking generally healthcare resources, but as a result of COVID-19. That's about as specific as I can kind of imagine it right now, trying to take the collective ideas that are coming out.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Pilat. One thing that I think is really important on this information is that it be relevant and on a regular basis. A one-time report at council coming from AHS would be useful at that time. Currently, right now, there's not a lot of decisions in front of council in regards to COVID. We've made one decision and the rest sort of is in the province's hands. So I think that if when this presentation comes forward, it'll be great information for the time. However, my request to whomever presents is that this update be on a regular basis. One-time stats on what's happening currently in ICU is great information. It's not relevant to future making decisions. So unless we were to get this information on a regular basis, I don't really know how relevant it is to any decisions we make. So I don't think the motion needs to be amended. It just, as this presentation comes forward, it would be, a point that it be on a regular basis. I also think it's possible, maybe I'll ask Director Manuel if you readily have the information to briefly update us on suicides and overdoses currently, or if that's something you would like to come back with later.
So administration does have suicide and overdose information. We don't have it at a weekly basis, but we certainly have it at least on a quarterly basis.
Great. So possibly as part of that, maybe at the next committee meeting, if it's something that could be updated on. I also can't make a motion at this committee, but would appreciate that information maybe at the next committee meeting if appropriate.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. I've been sitting here for a little while with my request to speak button on, wondering why I was being ignored. It's so odd to have this hybrid kind of model where we're using it at some meetings and not using it at others, and even for committee meetings to be in chambers is unusual for us. So thanks for your patience with me. I will support this motion, and I appreciate that it is our desire to have more information. I'm concerned, though, about what, as a council, we are to do with that information if all we are given is information and not context or recommendations. And I think that that is actually what we're looking for here. Does it matter? Does it matter what, how things go one way or another if we don't even know what to do with that? We found ourselves in a position a few months ago to make a decision on something that none of us felt really had enough expertise to make, and that was whether or not we would require our residents to use masks in public spaces. We came to a middle of the road decision that may or may not have been the best decision. And I think that we can all acknowledge that that was a tough decision to make because, sure, we had information about case rates, we had information about, you know, the statuses that the province was putting out there, with the exception of enhanced, because that's there are a number of triggers that would create an enhanced status. So I guess my concern and my challenge, and what do we then do as a group with the information when we've got it? And that's the bigger question, and in fact, I think the more important question. So it'll be interesting to see what happens today, and I'm hopeful that as we hear from our provincial government today, Minister Shandro and Dr. Hinshaw, on what of her recommendations may be activated in Alberta, I'm hopeful that as a group, perhaps municipalities could say, okay, whoa, hold it. We need recommendations that, or, you know, we need trigger points. We need if this, then that, if this, then that. That really is what we need to make these decisions. So I will support this today, but it's a little aside from the information we actually need. And I think in the next week or so, perhaps we could organize ourselves enough to understand what really is the information that we need to be able to make good decisions if the decisions are downloaded to the municipal level, as we have seen some decisions in the past as it relates to COVID-19.
Thanks for that, Councillor Friesen. I'm just going to ask if Mrs. Karbaschewski is available, if she could kind of read back the motion that we had on the table. Sorry, Amanda, today. I know Mayor Given took a great chance at it here, or took a swing at it, so I just want to make sure that we're actually collecting what his intention was.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. I have committee-directed administration to work with Alberta Health Services to provide more information to Council as soon as possible with respect to utilization of local healthcare resources as a result of COVID-19.
That meets your intent, Mary? Okay. All right, so I appreciate that. And is there any more discussion on this motion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously here in Chambers. Any other discussion on this, Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, I'm going to follow through with Mayor Given's request to have somebody from AHS come and present regarding some of the questions that we have today at the next available council meeting.
And I appreciate that. I guess just to set them up for what we're asking for, do we have a list that we'd want specifically? I just want to see somebody. It'd be great to have AHS come in here, and I'm looking on our list today, seeing all these great Q3 updates, and it sure be nice to start having that regularly from AHS. I just want to make sure that we don't get somebody here and then we set them up with a bunch of questions and we kind of make them not want to come back. And so I guess is there
my thought was just a COVID update, and what's where do we sit right now? Are we prepared? Are we inadequate? Or are we over prepared? And basically, do we have beds in case things turn ugly overnight?
Okay. Mayor Given?
Thanks, Councillor Pilat. Yeah, I think we might have to be a bit more specific on the motion, requesting an update. It's possible that we'll see, this is a fast evolving situation. It's possible that the context could change significantly by that next council meeting. I think one thing that hasn't been forthcoming since the spring is any sort of projection. In the spring, the province released some projections about what the curve looked like, and that was a big focus for everybody. It obviously didn't materialize the way expected in the spring. At the most recent phone town hall with Dr. Hinshaw and the Premier, I asked the question of Dr. Hinshaw if the province would be releasing new projections based on our current trajectory. And she said that the province hadn't discussed releasing new public projections, that they had internal ones that they were using for their planning. And she said that the trajectory today is in alignment with the projections from the spring. I don't really remember them. I do remember that they weren't good. But it was an interesting answer to me that the province released something publicly early, but they have something privately now that they're using internally. But her answer indicated that they hadn't yet decided, that they weren't releasing that publicly. So I think that some information on the trajectory and forecast would be really helpful information, because it would help us understand where we are today and where the current path leads. And I think that in combination with the current utilization of healthcare resources would help us give us some context to think about where we stand right now at a point in time and where the current path may lead. And then council be in a position to put those two pieces of information together as it's thinking about what our role is. So Councillor O'Toole, I think if the request was for Alberta Health Services to present on trends and forecast with respect to COVID-19 growth, I think that kind of motion might give us that additional bit of information. So that trends and forecast for COVID-19 cases and growth.
You say it so eloquently, that's kind of what I was thinking. No, the problem that I have when I was trying to make that motion is things are changing so rapidly. Like, the numbers were, say, good yesterday. Today, we don't know what they are. Tomorrow, it could be 3 times the amount. So that's kind of where I was wondering where we're going to be at, and are we prepared for it? Thank you.
I guess for me, and it would be great to have somebody from Alberta Health Services come and present. And I guess something I'd be curious about is what the utilization of the hospital has been up to this point as well. Because again, this is hearsay in the community, but you hear quite often that our hospital's never been emptier. And I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm not in a practice of just going and seeing the hospital and seeing how busy it is around there, but that's a question we could ask. I just want to make sure that we're not blindsiding them when they come here with the information. So, Councillor Minhas.
Thank you. But I'm hearing today, this morning, actually, they were saying they lost whoever contact wherever the things happen in the COVID-19. But the announcement today is going to be kind of tough. They're even thinking to shut down the school to control the situation in Alberta. I think there was over 1,525 this morning. They announced the cases happened yesterday. So we are the highest in whole country, I think, right now. So depend what announcement happened, then I don't know what reaction we're going to do in our council to change whatever happens.
Mayor Gibbon?
Yeah, thanks. So just did a little bit of quick looking, and maybe that request would be, again, we can be a bit more specific and try to dial it in here if we're okay collectively, but to request an update on the April 8th COVID-19 modeling released by the province. So it was back it's dated April 8th. As I scan it, I don't get a sense of how the current situation matches up to those models. They released 3 different scenarios: elevated, midpoint, and probable. It'd be interesting to see where we match up to that. In that presentation, they also released information about acute care capacity that was existing back in April, and they also released information about what plans they had to expand acute care capacity. And so it'd be interesting if they provided an update to that modeling, we'd know how they did it expanding acute care capacity, what's available now. So maybe that's what we should be asking for, is an update to that April 8th COVID-19 modeling released by the province of Alberta.
Thanks for that, Member Councillor Bressey.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how useful the modeling is to me for my thinking the decisions that we're likely to have to make. And I mean, it's tough for me because it so depends on what gets announced this afternoon, if anything gets announced, and it also depends on if municipalities later this week across the province decide to start taking health measures on their own, or if they hold firm that this should be a provincial decision. So it's hard to know what decisions will come before us, but for me, the modeling data that, hey, exponential spread happens in the community and it can be really bad, I don't really need to know that. What I need to know is what are the likely actions that will reduce that spread. And that's things like, what is the latest evidence on asymptomatic spread? What's the latest evidence with contact tracing and where it's being spread in our community? Is it at private gatherings? Is it at certain classes of businesses? Is it mostly coming from workers who are showing up to work sick? Is it coming from general community members? It's that kind of information that's more useful to me than what the general model looks like. And I don't know how much that information the province even has, but it's for me, just looking at the model isn't useful to me. I want to know what's the latest evidence that we've actually seen in our province in the last 4 to 5 months about where this is spreading is what's useful to me as I think about what regulations and responses we might implement as a municipality.
So I'm just going to ask, Amanda, if you wouldn't mind reading back Councillor O'Toole's motion, just so that we're all clear. And then as I'm seeing no other hands go up, just so we know what exactly we're voting on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. So far, I have committee-direct administration to request Alberta Health Services provide an update at the next possible City Council meeting regarding trends and forecasts with respect to COVID-19 growth, including an update on the April 8th COVID-19 modeling as presented by the province.
Is that was your intent? That you're fine with that, Councillor O'Toole?
I think that was a great team effort. Thank you, Mayor Given, and thank you, Amanda.
Fair enough. No, I agree. So seeing no other hands going up in chambers here, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And so that will close that off. Thanks to Director Manuel for his updates. And we'll move on to item 1.2, our food truck permitting. And I'll ask Wendy Hughes to present, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you through the chair. On June 29th, a delegation from the food truck industry appeared before council to discuss and share concerns with what they believe to exist within the food truck permitting and residential parking restrictions. Subsequently, council made the following motion. Number 1, direct administration to meet the delegation and discuss their concerns. To identify additional new or potential locations for food trucks for the 2020 season and refer this matter to the appropriate public meeting for further discussion. As a part of continuous improvement, administration has completed a comprehensive review of the inspection, business licensing, and site scheduling processes. Administration also reviewed residential parking restrictions and a number of city-controlled sites. Administration has since met with the delegation to discuss their concerns and provide answers to questions related to permitting and residential parking restrictions. Since then, administration has held a series of meetings with interdepartmental stakeholders from across the organization to identify opportunities for process improvements and the potential for process efficiencies. On October 29th, results were compiled and reviewed from 3 surveys, which were available to internal stakeholders, food truck owners, and the general public. Improvements identified are related to city-controlled sites, additions, as well as scheduling efficiencies and city-controlled parking fee options, while other processes were identified as maintaining at best practice levels. Upon review of the inspection process, administration concludes this process meets all mandatory provincial requirements while offering the added convenience of 1 appointment to food truck operators. This has accommodated 24 food truck operators within the 2 date options in 2020. Administration may add other dates in the future, but this will be dependent on increased demand or growth in the industry. In respect to site options, administration has added 2 additional city-controlled sites in the summer of 2020. These sites are Eastlink and South Bear Creek. This brings the total of to 7 city permissible sites. The city will continue to host Food Truck Friday held at Montrose Cultural Center, where up to 3 trucks are permitted to operate at one time. Food trucks are also invited to attend city events such as Canada Day and Heritage Day. Future sites must meet criteria and considerations such as food operation agreements within city facilities, the proximity to existing restaurants, as well as site safety and site accessibility. Many suggestions received through the survey were related to private locations. For city-controlled site scheduling, administration has now moved to centralized bookings for added convenience. Further to this, administration will implement an online option for the 2021 season. This will offer a user-friendly option with accessible information on city permissible locations and site availability to food truck owners. Although the processing times will be reduced from 3 to 5 days to approximately 2 to 3 days, staffing resources will still be required to coordinate the schedule so that it is fair in accommodating most requests. However, no shows will continue to affect site scheduling and site utilization. As well, the growth has substantiated from 17 food trucks to 24 in the past year. To mitigate that and to offset administrative costs, a proposed fee is indicated. A daily rate of $14.30 per day, a weekly rate of $54.75 per week, and a monthly rate of $119.05 per month. City-owned operated special events, formerly $150, be reduced to $50 per event. These fees are similarly based on municipal comparators in the city of Edmonton as well as the city of Calgary. However, administration recommends that a $50 cancellation fee be implemented as an alternative, while reducing the city-operated special event from $150 to $50 per event. Note that reservations can be canceled by food truck owners without the $50 cancellation fee if 48 hours is received by the city. In respect to overnight residential parking, and upon review of survey results, it was determined that only 2 respondents identify this as a specific concern. Parking for food trucks not operating in active food engagement is subject to the general parking provisions for commercial vehicles found in both traffic bylaw C-1166 and the land use bylaw C-1260. These provisions are not specific to food trucks. Therefore, administration does not recommend any changes related to parking restrictions. And finally, business licensing bylaw C-1393 added a requirement that food trucks must provide recycling and waste receptacles to customers when in operation unless participating in an event where receptacles are provided by the event organizer. This supports responsible environmental stewardship as well. Information on this new requirement will be provided to all food truck operators at the time of licensing. In closing, administration recommends that the Protective and Social Services Committee approve the implementation of food truck permitting and process improvements as presented, and direct administration to prepare an amendment to bylaw C-1395 to include canceled reservation and special event parking fees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Hughes. Councillor Friesen, and then Councillor Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. I just have one question. I see that the all 23 food truck owners were surveyed. Of those, how many responded? I see the percentages and numbers there for a total of 76 responses, but of the 23 to whom the survey was circulated, how many individual truck owners responded?
Yes, so through the chair, we did receive all 23 responses.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Councillor Pilat. The response to the original request from the food truck owners has been very comprehensive, and I'm really appreciative of the amount of work that was done. My own focus has to do with their initial concern regarding parking at home when they're not operating. And the answer in this report is not clear to me. So what I'm wondering is whether or not there's anything in the traffic bylaw or in the LUB that restricts truck owners from being able to park at home. I know what the restrictions are in the traffic bylaw, but I don't know how they apply in terms of the size and weight of food trucks. So I'm curious to know whether or not there's still a concern for food truck owners.
Okay, I'll take that question for Ms. Hughes. I was the one that spoke directly with the delegation, and the specific concern that was raised had little to do with the fact it was a food truck. The property in which the delegation lived at, she was a tenant in a secondary suite, which is considered a home-based, essentially a secondary suite under the land use bylaw is considered a business. So two businesses each have parking requirements, which that property could not support. So the concern had little to do with the fact it was a food truck. Any commercial vehicle for a business purpose wouldn't have been permitted at that property, given the specific conditions of that property, if that helps.
So was there a solution available for this person?
We identified alternative parking arrangements and haven't heard of a follow-up concern.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Minhas?
Thank you, Wade. My question is that safety inspection has to be once a year. Every time they put the truck on the spot, they had to get an inspection done before they started working on it.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yes, that is correct, Councillor Minhas, that it is required once a year for inspections.
Not at the time they use it. If they use it once a month and then go back again, that's okay to go, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I'm just going to jump and just ask a question here, and then I'll go to Councillor Clayton. Can you just confirm for me, so if somebody were to pay the $85 inspection fee annually and then just decided to park at Canadian Tire or Ernie's or the different locations, do they have to pay anything for permits if they're parking at Canadian Tire or Ernie's or those kind of locations?
So no, inspection fees are actually, the inspections are actually free. It's only when they are flagged for items that are required for further further inspection, then the $89 fee would be implemented. They can park at any private location as long as they have an agreement in place or permission from the private landowner.
So just to clarify, so I could park, if I buy a food truck, I could park it at Canadian Tire, no inspections. I'd need an inspection if I had a reason to have an inspection if somebody called me, or?
No, inspections are required.
Just annually, okay.
Annually.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Plot. I just had a question in regards to the suggested option in regards to permitting fees and then as well as cancellation fees, and that administration recommended option 2, which is charging the cancellation fees. I'm curious how that's going to be collected.
So certainly, thank you through the chair. What will happen is if there's an actual cancellation, that particular food truck business owner would be flagged for a fee if we had not received the 48 hours notice for cancellation.
Yeah, so Are we allocating, is this a bylaw enforcement thing, or we're just going to wait for them to sign up again and then say, oh, by the way, you still owe us from last time you canceled, or how will that be administered?
That's what we're proposing through the chair, sorry. Rather that once they try and reschedule that, we perhaps discuss alternative options with them and as well remind them that there was a cancellation, that a $50 fee would be imposed.
Thanks.
And I'm just going to come back and just ask one more question here. So in our recommendation, if we approve this today, are we in essence approving the fees that are outlined in this, or will that be brought up through fees and charges still?
So yes, so the cancellation fee would be a part of our policy and procedures. There is a fee charge, the bylaw fees and charges through fees and charges that will be discussed at a later date.
And just one other question, then I'll go to Councillor Bressey here. I may have another one after that, but just, was there any thought about charging fees when you're parked at non-city events? So if you're parking at Canadian Tire 100 nights, 100 days of the year, there's an $85 inspection fee. Was there any thought about having a fee no matter where you park in the city for food trucks?
We did consider that. However, it is private land, so to impose that fee would be at the discretion of the landowner.
Okay, so I guess for trying to understand this, because I'm getting a lot of restaurant owners picking me at this. So Canadian Tire has a retail permit. They don't have a food permit, but we put a food thing on their site. They don't have a permit for it. I'm just trying to understand how I connect the dots to go back to the restaurant industry and say, hey, they don't have to have a permit to park somewhere that was never approved as a restaurant or as a food service.
Right. So specific concerns from the restaurant industry are well received. We do understand that there is complexities around that. However, when it comes to privately owned locations, it is difficult to impose fees on their land. However, we can revisit the business licensing to include that consideration.
Okay, thank you for that. I see Mayor Given and Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, Councillor Pilat, yeah, fair question. I know that tension is there and something the council needs to consider when they're dealing with this issue. I think it's, important to put in, sort of put the different fees, in their appropriate categories. So for the inspection of the vehicle, I think I heard administration say there's no cost to that. We want people to comply. There's only a cost if you fail, and there's a added expense to having to do it over again. And that applies to everybody, no matter where they park on privately owned property, like a business parking lot, or on city property. There's the food truck business license fee, and that schedule's in the report from $105 to $420. And that applies no matter whether you park on city property or on private property. To run a food truck business, quote unquote, in Grande Prairie, you have to pay that no matter where you park. And then the other one is, the other sort of portion is, if you're using city property, we charge you rent to be on that city property. And so that's sort of so there's the inspection cost and a fee for service there, which is essentially free unless you messed up and then there's more work that goes along with it. There's the licensing fee to have a food truck business in the city of Grande Prairie. And then there's the rent that the city might charge if you're using city-owned property. So somebody could be in a privately owned parking lot, and they'd have to do the first two things. They'd have to, have an inspection for health services and fire and everything else. They would have to pay to operate that business inside city limits, but they're not renting property from the city for their location. So it's just, I think that's a bit more clear way to sort of explain the fees to somebody who's asking about them. Council, of course, can decide to set those fees at whatever level. If we want to charge more to rent city land to run your business on, we could choose to do that. If we wanted to charge more for the license to operate this kind of business in the city, we could choose to do that. And it is a reasonable debate to have about the overhead that comes with running a bricks and mortar store, which we want to support, and compare and contrast that with the overhead that comes with operating a mobile outlet. They're very, very different, and this is something I think cities struggle with lots. But I think those sort of three categories, inspection fee, right to operate a business, and rent of city property, are the best way to describe the three categories of fees or expenses that operator might have.
Thanks for the clarification on that. Councillor Clayton, Councillor Minhas, Councillor Bressey, please.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. So based on the mayor's breakdown, I'd like to talk about the rent to operate the business. I can't support on this subject at this committee, but I would encourage committee to consider implementing both options, permitting fees as well as cancellation fees. So I think that it's more than reasonable to think that if you wanted to pay $50 a week to use city land, that's very fair. And then in turn, if you cancel and you're preventing someone else from using that city land, you should be penalized. To have one or the other, in my opinion, isn't enough. Business owners pay, as noted in some of the comments, and as noted by Councillor Pilat, pay significant amount of money to be in our city on land that we own. I think that there should be a premium to it. If somebody wants to go set up in a private parking lot, a Canadian Tire's commented quite often in there, then that liability belongs to that private landowner. And if they choose to continue to let those businesses operate, that's their business. But on our land, I think there should be rent for what it's valued at, because there is limited spaces that you can operate. But I also think if you're preventing someone else from being there, that you also should be penalized. This is nothing against food trucks. I think they offer a great amenity. They offer great cultural opportunities for people that are looking for a quick bite to eat, etc. But we only have so many locations, and they seem to be continually growing. So I think that the rates as proposed, the permitting fees as well as the cancellation fees, are very fair, and I would encourage committee to implement both. Thanks.
Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Madam Given. Yeah, I was kind of supported off the bill. Mayor said it. But my question is different than a little bit. What's the difference with home-based one-day time application fees, 300, and home-based license, 200? It means to me, if somebody sell the food from home, do they get inspection done once a year, or they just can go sell the food anytime and just to get the license, $200?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Inspection has to be done. There's definitely, that's mandatory provincial requirements to have that inspection. What we're talking about in terms of home-based business, a one-time application fee is $300. This includes a bit of back work that is required by administration to look at the home-based business, as well as to come up with a decision based on that inspection. The home-based business license is currently at $200, so that this they don't have a restaurant that they're currently running out of. This is certainly just a home-based business in terms of there is one owner.
Thank you. Councillor Bressey.
Great, thank you. Before I ask my question, something I want to highlight is in the survey response from food trucks, most of the ones filled out by operators commented on how good city administration was to work with, and that the city is really pleasant to work with. And I think that's something that council should recognize and should celebrate. So a big thank you to administration for being good to get along with this industry. Really appreciate that. My question is, has there been any conversation with the management of Eastlink Center and Montrose Cultural Center about the impact that food trucks might have on our business lines, in terms of we do for those facilities rely on revenue from restaurants leasing space, and I'm curious if food trucks devalue those leases, if we've looked at just from a business sense, if we're losing significant funds by allowing these in places where we've got restaurant space that we lease out.
So, thank you through the chair. Through some conversations with Stephanie Cajulet and her team, there has been no reports of lost revenue. They do, however, with the scheduling process, they determine whether foods that are served within the city facilities are not the same as the foods that are being served within the food truck location.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I know for me, I honestly struggle with food trucks. I mean, I love them. They're one of my family's favorite things to do, but I also really appreciate a restaurant saying, hey, wait a minute, I pay tens of thousands of dollars a year in property tax, and I don't think the rent and all those expenses are so relevant to city decisions, but the property tax we charge most certainly is, and really feel for those businesses. And I honestly really struggle in terms of how inexpensive and how accessible we should make food trucks in our downtown core and at least Eastlink Center where there's other food options. I think when we're talking about out at South Bear Creek Park or other places where there are no restaurants around, yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. We want food trucks there. I honestly really struggle, though, with do we allow them in other places where I appreciate low capital business and somebody being able to improve their family operating a business like that? I appreciate the enhancement they bring to our residents and the feel of our downtown core. And at the same time, there's the equity side of it. And this is honestly a tension for me that I'm wrestling with, and I honestly don't know what my opinion is. This is one of those tough decisions on council. It isn't maybe the biggest dollar one we do, but is one of the toughest ones from an equity and what's fair and what's right perspective.
Fair comments. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I don't remember actually what I had my hand up for because that was a little while ago. I think I had a question, but it was answered. But you know, you've really made me think with that last comment, Councillor Bressey. And you know, throughout history, we see new business models crop up, and one of the thing that we know about business models is that they answer a demand, they answer a need. And sometimes that need is, or that demand comes from, you know, the customer. You know, we want food trucks at our events. We want food trucks out where restaurants aren't, that sort of thing. But sometimes the demand may also come from the need for the business to operate on a model that is sustainable for them, and food trucks respond to that as well. So you know, I get that struggle, but it's not our place to say that, no, we're going to stick with the old business model because that is, you know, we're going to support the old business model and penalize the new business model. I think I'm ready to make a motion and actually suggest an amendment. So unless there's, are we ready for that?
Yeah. We've had lots of conversation. I think everybody's been through the queue once on it. And so if you want to make a motion, it's going to be debatable at that time still.
Okay. I would like to suggest an amendment to the rent, if you will. Currently in the city-operated special event, $50 per event. It was formerly $150, and to drop it down to $50 when, generally speaking, we know that city-operated events are well attended, and you know, we were getting great response to city-operated events at the $150. I'd like to suggest that we drop that down to $100 per event rather than 50, which is what's on the recommended table. That's the only amendment I'd like to suggest to that table. I like the idea of the cancellation fee, and that table 2 there is the recommended option by administration. I'd like to, yeah, if we can make this amendment, then I'll proceed with moving that we send that to council. Thanks.
Okay, so the motion is just to change the specific line item on city-operated special events, which was formerly $150, that was recommended at $50 to $100. understanding your motion correctly. That's the intent. So open for discussion or debate. I see Councillor Clayton, Councillor Given, then I'd like to enter the queue after that, please.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. A question for administration. If this amendment is passed, or even the fees as suggested are passed, is there an opportunity for administration who's managing the event per se to offer to reduce the fee or to pull the fee if, you know, if this any particular event is not getting subscription from food trucks? Say we make a new event and we really want to have a great selection of food trucks. With this bylaw being passed, would there still be an opportunity for, on an individual circumstance, administration to say, you know, for this event, there's no fee? I'm just curious how that works.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I believe that we could consider different or newly introduced special events with that recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Pilat. So I guess my question for administration would be just of clarification. In reading the report, it's not clear to me if it looks like there's an option 1 and option 2, and it said administration recommends option 2, but so was the intention to have an either or choice there, or is the cancellation fee idea on top of the permitting fees? I'm just not quite clear about that. It would seem like, and the reason that I ask is it seems to me that it would make sense to have the fees that are set out in the first table for food truck parking permitting fees for city-controlled locations, and also have the cancellation fee. So you would pay those fees, and if you cancel and pull a no-show, you pay an additional cancellation fee. Is that what administration intended? Because the line just below that says administration recommends option 2 makes it seem a little bit like it's an either or.
Thank you, through the chair. So in conversations with administration, we had proposed the fees to have the daily, weekly, monthly, as well as the special event. And then we also did municipal comparators and found that larger centers not comparable to this size of Grande Prairie were the only ones that had the food truck parking permitting fees, those cities being Edmonton and Calgary. So to offer an alternative and to help reduce cancellations, we came up with the recommendation that we would have a $50 cancellation fee. And as well, we would reduce the city-operated special event fee from $150 to $50. So this was just an option for committee to consider, but that ultimately was the intent.
Okay, thanks very much. So if I understood that correctly, then Councillor Friesen, one thing I'd like to support, and I'm not sure if this is your intention now that we got that clarification, but if it was that the food truck parking permitting fees for city-controlled locations be amended to address the $100 fee that for city-operated special events, as you did, and the inclusion of a cancellation fee for missed reservations, then it's clear that we're basically pulling all the fees into that one table, and would maybe make it a little bit clearer. That's what I kind of was thinking that we were discussing and debating, and I don't know if you're open to that, but maybe that's all done with one motion to amend that table to include the cancellation fee as well as that in the actually decrease from 150 down to 100 for city-operated special events. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And that would, yes, thank you, Mayor Given.
Okay, so if that's the motion, I'm happy to support that motion that reduces the fee from $150 for city-operated special events and brings in a new cancellation fee. I think that that's fair to other operators. If one operator books up a space and there's a limited number of spaces but chooses not to use that space, that is a impact on another operator that could have booked that space, and so there should be a consequence for not utilizing space that when consuming a space that you didn't actually use. So I'm happy to support Councillor Friesen's motion.
Okay, thanks for that, Mayor Given, and for clarification on that, Councillor Friesen. Just a question for administration: do we have, just to try to get in context, Do we have a good understanding of how many square feet in our city are being occupied by restaurants and how many employees are in our city work for a typical restaurants?
Yes, through the chair, we do not have that information readily available. However, we could obtain that for you at a later date.
Okay, so and another question on that, I guess with the season we're heading into with winter, if we weren't to make a decision on food courts today and we looked at this until we had further information, is there any major events that we have happening in the next 60-ish days that would impact food truck vendors if we didn't make any decisions? And I guess for me, I'd like to hear a little bit more of how this would impact industry, because I'm very concerned about industry, as Councillor Bressey said it on that. So I'm just wondering what the risk would be to the city if we didn't make a decision on this today specifically and start looking at this, maybe, you know, have a little bit more conversation. I think that the survey was great, but from the survey, I know I've got an awful lot of calls from restaurant owners very concerned about this. And so I appreciate we did a lot of consultation with the food group industry, because that's who brought this to our attention, which I think was great that they did. But from that now, the unintended consequence might be that we haven't consulted with industry on that. And then I think we're missing one of the major stakeholders on this. So just if you could clarify how this would maybe look for the city if we move this back for, say, 60 days.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. At this time, we believe that we do have some time. However, the bylaw and rates wouldn't take effect until January 2021 if it was agreed upon at committee today.
So if we did nothing at this point, then the old rates would stay kind of how they've been. And then in January, February, if we made decisions later on, they would be amended at that point, and then they would move with that rate moving forward, if I'm understanding that?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. No, I really appreciate that. And I think the numbers that I'm hearing from industry that I'd like to have clarified, because I mean, I want to trust my peers, but I'd also like to have the city run the same data. But anywhere from $50 to $175 a day is what it's costing the average restaurant for property taxes every single day. $50 to $175 a day, every day. Days they don't want to be open, days that they're paying overtime to staff, when there's stat holidays, those kind of expenses that they have to bear. And so for me, I'm going to be probably the guy like with Councillor Bressey. I'm going to be very honest of where I'm at. I think the fees are incredibly, incredibly low. I think if we want to support the industry, the bricks and mortar that's paying a lot of property taxes and creates a lot of employment, I wouldn't be supportive of these fees at all. If we're looking at being honest about setting up a restaurant, you got to pay your first month's rent minimum, and that's going to be thousands of dollars. First month's rent minimum was thousands of dollars. So I think the barrier to entry for food trucks, I'm all for having them in the South Barriers and locations that make sense. As far as having them parked on streets downtown in random locations, I don't have a lot of appetite for that, because I really think we're actually hurting our local restaurants a lot, and I've heard a lot of concerns with that. So I wouldn't be supporting any of this today, because I think I'd want more information. And I also think this is at a time when the market is going what it's going as, and we have restaurants that are continually struggling, and it's not flattering here in their numbers right now, to be looking at lowering fees to a group and making it easier for them to be in our market is just not something I think the timing's good on. So I wouldn't be supporting any motions today to move forward with food truck permitting until I had more information. Councillor Bressey?
Thank you. Yeah, I just when we're talking about what a traditional restaurant pays, I want to be careful with that in terms of, I really agree with what Councillor Friesen said about allowing the market to adapt and government not getting involved in the free market. And I really do believe in those principles. I think for me, it's recognizing though that we don't have a completely free market, because the city interferes by charging property taxes. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's not really relevant in terms of what a restaurant would pay in rent and what they pay to staff and what they pay to all those things that the city doesn't have any say in. For me, it's just relevant, what are they paying in city property taxes? And also for me, it's not really relevant what they're paying in city property taxes for their sitting area, because that's their business model, is that, hey, you can come and you can sit here. And it's different than a food truck. For me, I think it is relevant though, what kind of city property taxes is a traditional restaurant paying for the kitchen portion of their business? Because I think it would be, I don't think it's fair if a food truck can undercut a traditional restaurant just because it's paying less city property taxes on its actual kitchen portion. If it needs to charge more because it's offering a sitting area, fair enough. That's free market principle. If a restaurant has charged more though, specifically because of city property taxes on the part of its business that a restaurant needs and a food truck needs, that's where I get concerned because it's not a free market anymore. And so I'm kind of a middle of the road guy where no, it's not relevant all the cost of a restaurant, but the city property taxes on the kitchen portion of a restaurant actually are relevant to me in this conversation.
Mayor Given?
Yeah. So I'll just say that I still support the motion. I appreciate the perspective about the cost of city property tax. I think it may be challenging to start to say, what is the average assessed value of only the kitchen portion of different restaurants? Like, that'll be a pretty challenging and complex, it's probably possible to calculate that, but that might be more trouble than it's worth. I think we all understand that there's a principle here, and we want to ensure that we're charging a rent on city-owned property that is more in alignment with the tax costs that a brick and mortar business has. That's, and so at a principle level, let's maybe talk about that rather than getting into this very, very specifics of it. For me, I believe that what administration brought forward to us is an improvement on the current system where there was no charge for using city property on a daily basis when it was not a city operated special event. So if you were parked at the Montrose Cultural, I think, if I'm understanding the report correctly, and the system correctly, I think if you were parked at the Montrose Cultural Center during a time when it was not a city-operated event, there was not a charge to do that, if I'm understanding what's here. This starts to increase those charges and to implement a charge. And so I think what we're really talking about is what is a fair rent? Is $14.30 per day fair rent for city property? And is it commensurate with the amount of property tax a brick and mortar restaurant might pay? For me, I'm happy to support this motion as a trial and say, hey, this is more than we used to charge. Is it the right amount? Well, let's just sort of see what sort of feedback we get from the industries that are impacted, and council can adjust those fees into the future. We have a fees and charges bylaw. Next budget, council may say, you know what, we went through the summer, it was really great, or we got a lot of feedback from food truck operators that really hated it and they're all mad at us, or, but council can kind of assess the results, see how it goes, and then at budget time, when we look at the fees and charges bylaw, have this discussion again and say, you know what, it could probably be a little higher to make this more equitable, or, you know what, it needs to be lower because we got really bad feedback and people are, I think this is a good common sense move forward and an improvement on our current system. That's why I'm happy to support the motion.
I'm just going to call my number again on that. And I appreciate the comments Mayor given. I guess the only concern I have is we haven't heard from industry on this one. And I guess that's where I'm really concerned about moving forward with anything when we haven't actually heard from industry. We heard very specifically from the food truck industry, not the overall industry, the bigger industry that's actually out there. So that's a big concern for me. And I'd rather not look flippant on it saying we approved it today and then we're going to look at moving the fees around. I think I'd rather have if we're not at harm with the community, I don't think by waiting, I don't think we're hurting anything. So I thought, Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I will help you out here, my friend and fellow councillor. I will make a motion to postpone this process until we get a chance to meet with the other side, the business owners that have brick and mortar in Grande Prairie.
Is there, I guess, furthermore, I don't know if you need clarification on this, but is there a specific date just so we know what administration's looking at on it, or do you have a kind of a date in mind, Councillor O'Toole?
I don't. I'm hoping that you might know.
I guess I'll ask administration what's a reasonable date if we were to postpone, what would be a reasonable date for them to collect the data or to start that process.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I would just like to mention that the surveys were also provided to the Downtown Association as well as to the general public. So anybody could have responded, and this included anyone that owns a restaurant within the city of Grande Prairie. However, in response to your question, I believe we could be able to put something together within 4 to 6 weeks.
Does that meet your timelines, Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, I'm thinking we'd probably give it 6 weeks. That way the Christmas season will be over. We'll be in the middle of January.
conversation on the motion? Mayor Gibbon?
So I appreciate the intent to have more dialogue. I won't support the motion to postpone because I think that that kind of feedback and input can come over the course of the next while. I think making this change is sensible. And I think the amount of work that council's considering, of administration's time that could be on other core issues. This was an issue that came up from the public. It wasn't on council's strategic priorities and where we really want administration to be focusing their time. I appreciate that there's some core principles at play here that people want to ensure that we get right. The observation that I'd make is this is starting to impose new fees and costs on the industry that didn't have them. I think council should be cautious about having somebody show up looking for an improvement to their industry, and then the result that comes out is that they get new fees and charges heaped on them. Because that was a part of the comment when this first came up is, oh, here's what council's going to do. And in fact, it is what we're doing is, somebody came and said, hey, I've got a bit of a problem here. Can you help me out? And we say, yeah, you bet. Here's some more fees. So just be cautious that even with these, lower fees, they're new and they may not be received that well. This is an improvement and is maybe moving the direction I think some council members want with more equity with brick and mortar. I think we should take that consultation in a more informal manner. Council members can decide how large a priority this is going into the spring and into the fall into budget discussions next year. So I won't support the motion to postpone. I think let's just deal with it. This is a relatively small issue. We'll get feedback one way or another about it, and then we can decide if it's something that we want to tackle or council wants to tackle into the future.
Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Pilat. As I initially said, that I think that the inclusion of the cancellation into the permitting fees is very important. I guess my question to committee members, if you were to postpone this and consult with restaurant industry, and restaurant industry says, no, we don't want food trucks, is this committee prepared to just cancel food trucks? So in reality, I think that, as the mayor pointed out, this is a good starting point. When I do the rough calculations at 14, at a $5,000 property tax, annually you're at $13 a day. So right now this permitting fee is $14 a day. So depending on the size of your restaurant, for example, you're not that far off. So I think that this is a good starting point, as the mayor mentioned. I'm glad to see that we are charging something, and I'm also glad to see that committee is considering putting in the cancellation fee, because I would hate to see somebody pay $14 and then to pick one or the other. So I think it needs to be inclusive of charging a fee and a cancellation if you don't show up, and then in turn, if you prevent someone else from being there, that would be a detriment. We want to have a good selection of food trucks. We could further down the road look at radius to restaurants, etc. But I think that this is a good starting point, and I would encourage council or committee rather to defeat this motion and go forward with the original intent from administration. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Clayton. I have Councillor Minhaus, Councillor Friesen, and then I'm going to call my own number again.
Yes, I strongly agree with the Mayor Gibbon and Jackie what he said, and also I don't think this part of the big effect on the restaurants, because special event people not going to go out and eat in the restaurant, but they need it right there when they're walking around and talking. Same thing the private, when they call in the truck food, they do the kid party or some other parties. I don't think it's very much big effect on the restaurant area for this reason. I understand the tax purpose we had mentioned earlier, but that's restaurant is there all the time, but there's a particular time they're going to be there 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour a day, so that's not going to be full day staying there in 24 hours. So I hope that you guys defeat this motion for Kevin O'Toole's and move on to the other motion to pass it. Thank you.
Councillor Friesen? Okay. So I guess for me, and I just want to push back on Councillor Clayton a little bit, the $14.30 might seem fair, but if every restaurant could just choose to be open Saturdays, they would, right? They're open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're in the trenches on days that aren't making money consistently for that same dollar amount. So That's where I'm having a real struggle with this. So I will be supporting the motion to postpone because I honestly don't think that hurts us. To Mayor Given's point, I think he is right. It is scary when you have industry come and say, hey, well, we've opened the conversation. But having said that, COVID has made a major, and it's going to have a long-lasting impact on what happens with our restaurant community. And if this wasn't COVID times, I probably wouldn't be pushing so hard. But optically right now, when you have an industry that is literally bleeding and struggling to keep their doors open, I just don't like the optics of approving food truck vendors of any kind at this point without more conversation. I think if we look through the notes, you'll tell where the industry conversations come in, and it was pretty obvious they don't want food trucks. They don't want them because it's not equitable. And so, yes, we started the conversation about food trucks, and the food truck vendors come in through the dialogue, which wasn't geared to restaurants. It was just food truck vending specific. It's pretty clear in there when you can tell which people were infected by restaurants. They don't want this. And so I guess to represent that other side, that's why I want to see the postponement happen, because I'd like to have a better handle on understanding. So as a council, we understand what are the average property taxes for a restaurant. And, to Councillor Bressey's point, if we want to say 50% of that is we're going to consider kitchen, 50, it's not going to be easy to model out the whole thing. But there's ways we can extrapolate a number to show fair and equitable on this as well. And that's why I support the motion to postpone. I won't support any motions to move this forward until we have conversation around those kind of things, because we're not hurting this community right now if we don't move this forward today. Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Councillor Pilat. I guess one of the things I'd like to remind Council about is that a year or so ago, we had a representative come from from a local liquor store who was concerned about the number of large company liquor stores that there were in Grande Prairie, and wishing that there was some restriction that we could put on that so that he would have a better chance of surviving. And our response at the time was that, competition is fair, and anytime that you want to beat out your competition, then you need to do what you need to do to attract customers. And I think that if we start talking about whether or not restaurants want food trucks as competitors or not, we're interfering in normal business within the community. And I really don't think that, I really do think that if restaurants want to concern themselves with whether or not there's food trucks, then they need to be dealing with attracting customers rather than restricting the competition that they would face in the community.
Your comments? I think we've had some pretty good debate about this, and we probably should get moving along here at some point. So we'll call the motion of Councillor O'Toole's to postpone. All in favor? 2 in favor, opposed, and 2 opposed. So that does not carry. So we'll move back to Councillor Friesen's motion. Councillor Friesen's motion. Mayor Given?
Councillor Pilat, yeah, so I recognize that we have 4 people on the committee. I appreciate my other council colleagues that were looking for a pause. Would encourage one or both of you, or at least one of you, to support this motion. We need to have some kind of forward progress rather than being stalled. Appreciate it may not be the progress that we wanted, but would encourage somebody to support this so at least the issue can move forward. Again, we can re-examine the other issues that have been raised and have those discussions informally with industry and bring something back. So I would encourage somebody to support this so that we can at least move this forward and improve on the current system that we have and start to get closer to cost equity. So just would remind council members that this is improvement over what we've got today. So it should move forward rather than sticking with the current system.
Okay. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Pilat. First, I just want to say that I absolutely support small business. I think that food trucks are a great start to get your foot in the door. And if you do realize that you have a passion and you choose to grow this opportunity, maybe then in turn you lease some commercial space, and maybe then in turn you buy a building. Right now, though, food trucks, there's 23 food trucks in our community. And sure, they may impact the restaurants a little bit at the lunch rush, etc., or on weekends when they're at festivals. But I own a chocolate store, and by not supporting this motion would be like me saying people shouldn't sell chocolate at the farmer's market. I mean, I think that at some point you need to let people fulfill their passion to own a small business. And so this is what administration has brought forward here is a very fair start at this, and we can review it in time. To not have any cost would, is not appropriate, and I think this is a good start. We try it out. If it doesn't work next summer, and as the mayor mentioned, we can review it next term. We can review it after next summer if we choose to. But I think that I encourage committee to support this, and one more of you to support this, because we need to move on with this. And yes, I agree. We need restaurants to be successful. They pay a lot of property tax in our community, and they are integral in our commercial building successes. But I think that there's an opportunity for a balance here, and that this bylaw does that. Thanks.
So we've had some good discussion on that, so we'll call Councillor Friesen's amendments. All those in favor? So 3 in favor, and myself opposed, so that does carry. Okay, thanks for that. That was lots of conversation about that, so we'll move on to our next item. Which I believe we're going to be looking at our Q3 community social development updates, and I'll ask for Ms. Angela Southern to present, please. Oh, sorry, my bad. We still haven't finished off that. That was just an amendment, so good catch, Councillor Friesen. Would you like to make the main motion?
Certainly. So I will recommend that the Protective and Social Services Committee approve the implementation of food truck permitting and process improvements as amended. And that, can I do these both at once, administration?
Yeah, sounds like it.
And that we direct administration to prepare an amendment to bylaw C 1395 to include cancelled reservation and special event parking fees. Okay. And I don't think I need to speak to that at this point.
Oh, I think we've had lots of dialogue. I don't see any hands coming up on that one, so we'll call that question. All in favor? 3 in favor and opposed 1 again, so that does carry. So nice catch on that, Councillor Friesen. Thank you for helping me chair this one, and I'll move on now to item 1.3, the Q3 update, community social development, and Ms. Angela Southern, please.
Hello, good morning. Okay. So I will give a brief high-level overview over the quarterly report that I've submitted to committee this morning. Just some key highlights around it include that our diversity inclusion project's underway. We have hired a consultant, and we will be kicking off that project this week. We are very excited to have this work progress and look forward to providing updates when appropriate. We've completed our consultations for the Indigenous liaison position, and we're bringing back a report to committee on December 8th. And as you are very well aware, we're continuing to work out a robust application on our proposed supportive housing project. I thought we'd include some responses to give you a general summary of what CSD has been doing around critical issues. And a few key points here is that we're continuing to oversee the COVID-19 support isolation project as we continue to work with our shelter to operate with social distancing measures in place. Some stats that are included in the table include our average nights for Rotary House and Oasis shelter programs for stays. Also included in it is the fact that we're still continuing to support the opioid task force. We're having our next meeting in January, and CSD provides a backbone support around administration and data. CSD is also responsible for overseeing the Street Outreach Center and monitoring that project as we move forward. And the center opened during quarter 4. So some key stats we thought we'd include there are on housing first, eviction prevention. Really wanted to highlight as well home support. It has been a really trying time, as you know, through COVID, and it was really deemed important that our home support people, very dedicated, working hard, and providing those services to people in their homes. We're back up to capacity now with a few people on the waiting list, and look forward to providing service to people as we go through this tough time through COVID and isolation. With our transit access program, we're also back up with usage, as well as a few uptake a bit on recreation access.
We decided to also include a bit of our community issues indicator table, and this is our first quarterly report to committee, and I look forward to continuing on developing and enhancing this fluid document. I think that there's opportunities here to be able to really share information to committee as appropriate around community issues. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, I'd be open to any questions at this point.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Sutherland. Any questions, Angela? Seeing none, I guess I really want to say thank you for this report. I guess it's just a nice snapshot of kind of what's been happening with some utilization and some programs that we get a lot of questions about. So I think this is good information for us to have. I did just have one question, I guess, just around the Indigenous liaison position. You had mentioned that we'll have a report coming back to committee. Will it identify a funding source if we were to look at hiring a position for that?
Through the chair, yes, the plan is to provide some possible options to look at different alternatives for funding sources, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no other hands go up, can I get a motion to accept this report for information, please? Mayor Given?
So move, we received the report from Community Social Development for information.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So we'll call that all in favor. Carries unanimously. Thank you for that, Ms. Sutherland. So we'll move on to our next item on our agenda, and I'll ask, we're going to have another Q3 update. If I could get Mr. Kelly Kokash with Enforcement Services, please.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go over my Q3 report with you. First thing on the list is we have recently assigned a full-time officer to act as a dedicated liaison between the department, downtown core, the MOP team, and really focus on homelessness initiatives and issues that are surrounding our downtown core. This initiative is really positive, and I'm seeing some really good returns on this. Getting more information than we've ever got from Rotary House, St. Lawrence Center, Friendship Center, Parkside Inn. I think this is a really positive thing. Run it as a pilot until December, but I can see just as the positive and the growth that we've had in reducing the amount of homelessness or encampments and encouraging people to utilize the service departments that we have in the city, that we're going to really try to continue that after December as well. Throughout our 3 months, I did attach line graphs as well, just to kind of give some meaning to some of the numbers that we have within our statistics. But in July, our infraction rates were discovered to be very high. We did slack off or didn't have as much enforcement within the city throughout Q2 and into starting Q3. So we've kind of ramped that up as of July, August. September was our primary focus in school zones. Again, we were very present in our conventional enforcement and photo enforcement. Our infraction rates were at par with previous years as well. We continue to be present within our school zones and encourage proper parking and speeds. Our positive ticket program wrapped up at the end of September 2020. And so that little program is where our bike unit and our foot patrol and our officers find youth and people within the community doing something very positive, helping somebody across a crosswalk, wearing their bicycle helmet or whatever. We give them a positive ticket. They come back to our office, receive a small prize or token of our appreciation. And at the end of that program, we issued a grand prize to a winner there who's very appreciative, and that's a very good program we have to encourage community involvement. Our line graphs, the report show that our enforcement maybe wasn't as present throughout Q2. We cover animal court summonses, animal licensing. Animal licensing was actually very close to 2019 in comparison to 2020. Animal offenses, we're simply out there doing a lot of proactive work and encouragement rather than giving tickets. Automatic traffic enforcement, of course, was we held the line in Q1 and 2. Coming into Q3, we put operations back on track as we found that offenses were significantly higher than past years, so we're trying to get that under control again. Bylaw offenses, again, we more education than anything as opposed to issuing tickets. That being said, our calls for service remained relatively steady for the year. We're undergoing a study with our collisions actually right now, and our step this last month was winter driving. We're finding that most of our collisions at intersections and that are really about rear end collisions and following too closely. So I'm working with our communications group right now to put out another press release to encourage people to not only social distance, but also socially distance properly while they're driving. Commercial vehicle inspections, we're getting that back on track as well. And as we took a bit of a break in Q2. And again, our dispatches are the same as with our complaints for service. They're really on par with 2019. The one I've included at the end is our GPS road data total loads. So that gives kind of a snapshot of the industry and how that affects our traffic volumes as well. But we are a bit lower for sure in 2020 over 2019, which is to be expected. That's all I have for the Q3 report, subject to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for that. Some questions, Councillor Bressey?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the face covering bylaw in terms of, I'd just love to know more about, have you received a lot of calls? Have they been going up and down? If you have received calls, how are those going?
Thank you. Through the chair, we have received quite a for service and a lot of discussion regarding the face covering bylaw. I've been a part of a number of public meetings. We've invited lots of businesses. As Wendy Bosch can attest to answering a lot of questions and to try to get businesses on board and also have them have a clear idea and a strategy to implement that bylaw. We have had quite a few calls regarding the face covering bylaw, but of course we are really opting for the education and the encouragement of people to use them. We haven't really had any struggle beyond that, just advice and encouragement of businesses to practice that.
And so most of the calls you're getting, are they usually members of the public calling to make a complaint against a business, or are they a business calling because they're having issues with a patron who's unwilling to put on a mask?
Through the chair, I see two different kinds of complaints or inquiries that we receive on a regular basis. One is businesses just asking how they would, or what their part is in enforcing the bylaw if the circumstance were to present themselves. That is really the bulk of the conversation. There was a few businesses that did call looking for assistance, and I know they've engaged us as well as the RCMP to attend their business to maybe ask those customers or clients to wear masks to enter the businesses. The other part is we get a lot of inquiries from citizens wanting to know why we're not out there giving tickets and enforcing the face bylaw more rigorously. So just explain our methodology behind that and note what departments or experiences they're having as well.
Thank you. And then my last question is, have we handed out a ticket at all under the face covering bylaw yet, or has it just been strictly education to date?
Through the chair, we have not issued any bylaw tickets for that out of our department.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bressey. Any other questions? Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kokesh. Of those businesses that have asked you to attend, how has the interaction been? If you could characterize what the interaction then is like with the individual that the business is concerned about, when when you're there, are you educating? Is there understanding and compliance, or what's that interaction been like in general, please?
Through the chair, our interactions in those types of circumstances have been very positive. But more times than not, the client or the person has already departed the business. The other one where we have encountered people, we have a way of delivering, trying to get compliance, I guess. So we explain that really once a business asks you to leave or you're not welcome there, that there's really, if they want to utilize those services, that they have to wear their mask, and usually they comply, or it's really not an issue. We haven't had any major blow-ups or any really negative feedback to the department, actually, as a result of our officers engaging those people.
Any other questions for Mr. Kokash? No? See none, thank you for your reports, and I'll just look for a motion to receive for information, please. Councillor Friesen.
So I'll move that we receive the report for information.
Okay, thank you for that. So all in favor of receiving the report? That carries unanimously. Thanks again, Mr. Kokash, for your presentation. And we'll move on to item 1 point fire, our Q3 reports from our fire departments, and we'll look for Mr. Preben-Bosson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll speak a little bit about some of the content in the report. So on the fire master plan, the consultants are currently working on the first draft of the plan and should have it available for review in December. It's anticipated the final report will be ready to present to council in February of 2021. The consultants have obtained a lot of information and have interviewed many stakeholders in order to complete this project. I anticipate the final document will be of high quality and should provide the city with a great plan to guide us into the future. So I'm not sure if there's any questions on the fire master plan specifically. If not, I'll continue on with the computer-aided dispatch upgrade. So I know there is a desire to receive reports that contains more visual elements such as graphs and maps. With the upgrade to our computer-aided dispatch system, we'll have instant access to reports on any data contained within the system and the option to display in different configurations. These options will be very beneficial as we are making evidence-based decisions on response models and response levels. The charitable foundation has not been as active as they normally would be because of the pandemic. They are, however, working behind the scenes to support those in need. The foundation's biggest event, Sparky's Secret Wish, is coming up quickly and preparation are well on the way. During this event, the foundation will donate $15,000 to 30 local families. So just on the stats, we are seeing an increased level of request for service, kind of back to probably the pre-COVID levels. The one deviation from that will be in the medical response area because we did reduce our role in the medical response program. And I'm currently preparing a report that'll come to committee December 8th, specifically to that program. So that's all I have. Certainly willing to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Boston. Any questions? Mayor Given.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair Pilat. Chief Boston, one item that kind of stood out to me was it seems like in the statistics that there are fairly significant increase to calls, to 911 calls generally. I'm curious if you have a sense of what's driving that, or just what your read of the winds are. Why are we seeing that? It looks like in some cases it's maybe more than in an average year. Yeah, so that was the one thing that jumped out for me, is that call increase in 911 calls.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair. I do not have sort of a good sense for where the increases come from, but I can certainly look into that and report back.
I think that works. I also had just a question, and maybe these are just those blips from COVID, but I'm just, on the opposite, our numbers seem to have been trending down for medical co-response and fire department total. Is that just because of the environment with COVID, or is there something more underlying below those numbers?
Through the chair again, so we participate in the MFR program, which is an Alberta Health Services program that engages fire departments in medical calls. The local fire departments can choose to what level they want to be involved in the program. And we kind of monitor that involvement ongoing. There's a fine balance between sort of doing the work on behalf of Alberta Health Services or a system to sort of provide better customer service. So we always sort of trying to find that perfect balance. As of January 1st, we actually reduced our involvement in the program because we felt that we were not really making an impact on some of the calls. The call types that we dropped. So you'll see our medical call numbers drop from that point forward. Obviously, during COVID, they even dropped more. So we will see some deviations in our medical call co-response stats kind of throughout the year. And I can certainly speak a little more to that on December 8th when I do report.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here today and doing this presentation. I also have a call or a question on the 911 calls. If you go to September and year to date, you've got 2018, 2019, and 2020. It's gone up about 4,000 calls. Is that due to the expansion of our call area in the last few years? Or is that just locally here?
Thank you, and I'm through the chair. So we really have not increased our service in that area. So when you see an increase in number of calls, that is a pretty comparison to probably growth in population and probably increase level of requests for calls. Our area for 911 virtually has remained unchanged in the last probably 5 years or so.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chief Boston. Thank you, Chair Pilat. I'm glad to hear the questions that are being asked. I had the same questions, especially around the increase in 911 calls. I guess, so I look forward to that presentation coming forward to council or committee when you have that, Chief Boston. I just need a bit of a definition around other responses. I was trying to code it, and I don't know if that's a cat jumping out of a tree or a domestic call or something like that. I was wondering if you might be able to fill in the blanks for me as to what other responses might entail.
Thank you, and through the chair. So we have many more subgroups of kind of call types. We have listed the bigger ones there, and then there's some smaller ones that we get one or two of apps that we sort of lump into our responses. So they're not sort of big enough categories to list them out alone. So that's kind of why we list them like that.
Okay, so more along the lines of the cat caught in a tree calls and stuff like that, I would imagine. It doesn't have anything to do with more serious natured calls.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other hands up in chambers here and other questions? I just look again for a motion to accept the motion report for information. Councillor O'Toole?
Yes, I move that we accept the fire department's presentation by Chief Roman.
All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thanks for your update, Chief Bosson, much appreciated. And we'll move on to item 1.6, our Q3 RCMP update with Superintendent Sean Curry, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, councillors, other attendees for the opportunity this morning. What I'd like to do is start off with an initiative that I had mentioned briefly at the last subcommittee meeting there, and that's the Special Investigative Unit. So that unit went live on September the 21st, and as you recall from the slides there in front of you, it was to address increases in incidents of domestic violence and also to be more responsive to victims of sexual violence. That unit has 1 corporal and 5 investigators, and they focus solely on those 2 groups of offenses to provide a better service to our most vulnerable victims. I have received information back. Obviously, I can't go into specifics of any particular file for privacy reasons, but they are more than well tasked with the investigations that are coming in. And we've actually received some outside feedback from the Crown's office noting the quality of the investigations that are coming in. So that's very encouraging to me that we're directing these resources to the right area and they're providing the service to those victims who need that extra attention for their protection. So I'll move on then to calls for service. So if you notice, we've provided data for July, August, and September. The numbers are very close to where they were the last couple of years. So even though we had a dip in calls for service through that period of lockdown in the early part of the year for COVID, over the summer, the calls for service and the necessity for police response remained relatively stable as past years. The next slide there you'll notice is the criminal code offenses and property type offenses. And this is year to date from January to September. And overall, there's a 10% decrease in those criminal offenses. Notably, you'll see some very large decreases in break-and enters and theft of motor vehicles. And persons crimes in the top part there is relatively stable. Now, again, that's data that I received from a divisional level, and it trends for the same year, so that's why it's presented in that manner. As for the specifics, particularly to Q3, and if you note on the next slide there, overall there was an 11% decrease in criminal code offenses within that Q3 period. Persons crimes did increase by 13%. I can't say specifically what that is for, but I would imagine that the impacts of COVID on everyone has put a considerable amount of stress, I think, on all segments of society, so that's probably not unusual. And then what I'd like to do now as we go forward, as I'm trying to tweak the information that I can give to the committee, so if there's feedback either now or through Chris at a later date, there's things that the committee would like to see, I can try to tailor this to the needs of the committee. But this is some of the commitments that we had made through our discussions at the annual performance plan meeting way back in February. So one of the things under the title of crime reduction was we were going to report on clearance rates for the detachment. So our Q3 clearance rates are at about 12.6%. This was not a metric that was used in previous performance plans. So I think this year was going to be our base year. So I don't know quite how that's impacted by COVID or not. So I put it out there. We'll just have to keep tracking it, and I'll continue to report on it. And another item there is that given the junior service of the membership there, we're always looking at ways to improve our quality of investigations and our working relationships with the Crown and with other agencies. And in this area here, with clearance rates and court processes, we wanted to improve that because of the strict timelines that are imposed on us by case law and, of course, by COVID, which has added stressors to the court system. So we changed the way we manage it with Crown, and I think we're seeing positive results from that. We had 826 violation tickets through Q3. Now, we also transitioned from a paper-based system into what's called PAT ticketing. PAT is an overlay on our records management system. It's a web overlay, and it allows us to print tickets in the vehicle, which will make it much easier for the members on the road, plus it should do better for data quality for us. The other component of that is it allows us to give not only tickets, but warnings, and all of that information is fed into our records management system, PROS. So all of that intelligence is gathered, and that can help us overall in what's going on in the community and assist us in any hotspots if we have to redirect our members. One of the areas where I committed to report back to the council was in terms of our FTE count. So we're funded for 104 positions, and so far this year we're averaging 101.45 positions. So at the end of September, we had averaged 100.2 positions full. And considering the stressors that COVID has put on our training at depot and transfers and to maintain service levels, I think that's doing quite well. And then finally, the other thing we committed to was to track and ensure we're communicating with the public as to what is going on with their police service, so they're aware of what's going on. And we've had 18 media requests, and we put out 29 media releases. So that's all I have for this morning, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you for your reports, Mr. Curry, and I do have a few hands up in chamber here. We'll go with Councillor Thiessen and then Councillor Bressey, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Pilat. Thank you very much, Superintendent Curry. Just a question in regards to the Special Investigation Unit, top of the slide. It says spousal abuse calls for service increased 39.3% between 2017 and 2019, which I think is a fairly alarming number, but without the stats for context, it's hard to determine where that 39% lies. My question really is, with the rest of the update from the RCMP for Q3, we have 2020 stats and things and efforts that have been put forward. How come we didn't include 2020 stats in the spousal abuse calls? And I guess to follow up with that question, do we know what the 2020 spousal abuse calls for service have been this year?
I don't have that data. I can certainly get that data. I think that the increase or the numbers was submitted there, put there to identify a trend, and then as a result of that trend, we're trying to be responsive as an organization to provide the best service we can to our most vulnerable individuals. If the subcommittee would like to have the data, the calls for service for that, then I can present that. I can gather that data.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Superintendent Curry. I think it would be important, especially when we consider the context of the times. Earlier today we had discussions around getting more data from Alberta Health Services in regards to hospitalizations, ICU, suicide rates, and overdoses. I think spousal abuse and domestic violence and potential child abuse as well are all part of the symptoms of coronavirus and lockdown measures, and I think it would be very important and for council to be aware of it, or at least our community to be aware of it, so we can find ways and strategies to mitigate these trends if they are going up or getting worse due to COVID.
I can collect that data there, Councillor Thiessen.
Councillor Bressey.
Great. Thank you for the report. I'm really appreciating the more transparency that's coming to council as well as the public. So really appreciate this. Just as you ask for feedback on evolving it, something that I think might be useful for council to see is I appreciate seeing clearance rates, but if it's possible, it would be interesting to get clearance rates differentiated from between property crime and persons crime. I think that I don't really want to judge clearance rates based on how many stolen bicycles you folks recover. I'm more interested in the serious crimes in our community, how we're doing with that. So just a thought. But the question I've got is looking at domestic violence and sexual violence. It's really disturbing to see that significant upward trend, and I really appreciate the RCMP and our local detachment flexing its resources to respond to that. But I also know there's a lot of non-police resources that need to go to that, whether it's healthcare, whether it's PACE, whatever it is. I'm just curious if you've got a sense of how referrals to organizations as you get called for these are going. Are you having issues are you having troubles referring people, and are you having more problems than you did in the past? Just do you have a sense of how the other systems we've got to respond to these are flexing our community?
I'm not necessarily always down in the weeds that far. I can say, though, that the NCOIC of our SIU, who was also the NCOIC of our domestic violence unit previously, which was a review unit instead of an investigative unit, is quite heavily connected with the resources available, and they hold regular meetings with their partner agencies. I have attended some of those meetings, and from what I can determine, and from the fact that we do have victims assistance here in the detachment, that we have the appropriate ability to refer these victims of these domestic violence and sexual violence crimes to the appropriate agencies to provide the follow-up. We're one component of it, and as you rightly stressed there, that it's more than just dealing with the criminality of it. It's the holistic approach to deal with the victim in totality. So we do have those resources in place. We do have the NCOIC of this unit directly tap into those committees. So I believe those resources are well placed.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's a little bit for you, but probably more for Director Manuel, who I expect is listening. I just hope that if there's a need for council to get involved in either advocating the provincial government for increased supports or increasing our own funding of victim services or of PACE or whatever, it's really concerning to me to see this 40% increase. So if we're seeing a community need beyond the RCMP need here, I hope that really gets communicated to council and we can figure out what to do, because it's so concerning to me to see that.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bressey. Mayor Given?
Superintendent Curry, thanks so much for the report. Appreciate that you're open to revision over time. One of the things that was really interesting to me, and I think should be a focus for council over time, is the effective stewardship and the resourcing. City of Grande Prairie, pays a significant amount for the positions that are established. Really great to see that over the term that's reported here, that you've been looks like doing a great job of keeping the resources there to the level that the City of Grande Prairie taxpayers are paying for. My question, request would be that maybe considering a comparison of the local detachment's FTE rate compared to the K Division average for detachments our size. I appreciate that there's always going to be some vacancies. I think we all sort of know that and expect that in any sort of large organization. I think what would help council is having a sense of if there's a significant deviation from the norm for other detachments our size. So great information for this year, just for this report, for feedback for the future, getting a sense of how our staffing compares with the K Division norms for detachments of our size would help give council a little additional context. But that seems like it's pretty high. If we pay for 104 and on average we've had 101.45, that's pretty good with that number of employees to keep staff to that level. So keep up the good work in that area and just provide that feedback for future reference.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other questions for Superintendent Curry? Seeing none, I could just look for a motion to accept his report for information, please. Mayor Given?
We received that for information.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So all in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And that was all of our reports and items, but we do have one item of correspondence, so I'm just not sure if that's who's presenting that. Is that Director Manuel?
Yeah, certainly I can do that. Okay, so the looks like the Canadian Mental Health Association recently purchased 5 additional properties adjacent to their Willow Place property. The city and CMHA had a previous agreement in which Willow Place was funded. The city essentially co-signed a mortgage with Willow Place, and there's an outstanding balance of approximately $86,000 from the original $1,385,000 remaining, and CMHA is requesting the city forgive or transfer to them in gift in kind that $86,000 so they can prepare a building site for spring development in 2021. At this point, administration's done no work in regard to this request, and it isn't part of our 2021 budget.
Okay. Thanks for the update on that. Mayor Given?
Sure. A question for Director Bork. And I know it's only a little while ago, but it seems like lots has happened since then. Can you remind me whether council has any funds available, or if there are any appropriate funding sources if council wish to support this request? I'm thinking about the Council Strategic Initiatives Fund, and I have a feeling we might have expended that, but I'm not exactly certain. And I know that we did have some money for affordable housing initiatives that could be potentially used for this. So, Director Bork, if council wished to support this, are there any potential funding sources?
Through the chair, Council Strategic Fund has been fully allocated for the remainder of your term. If council wished us to do some work, we would have to go back and look at what funding sources were available. We haven't done any of that work to date.
So I guess if, I'm sorry, Councillor Bressey, go ahead before.
Thank you. I'm just curious, where is the money for this repayment going? Is it going to general revenue? Is it going into our public housing reserve? Just what happens with the payments that do get made?
Councillor, through the chair, it's my understanding that the payments, the city isn't receiving any funds for these. Those payments are being made to the bank to clear the mortgage, and that with $86,000 remaining, that we would essentially be making the building mortgage free and allowing them to, which they already are in a position. We had removed our caveat on title for this property already on a previous request earlier this year. And so this building can already be refinanced, which is the intent of CMHA, is my understanding, that they would refinance this building. This would allow them greater access to funds as they would have a completely mortgage-free asset as opposed to the $86,000. But the city doesn't collect any money from this today.
Councillor Bressey, did you have a follow-up, or you?
No, I'm just, yeah, that's well, yeah, I'm just confused by that, because the letter says that they're paying back the city of Grande Prairie, and that was my understanding too. So I think that it is, I don't know what direction committee wants to give, but I would like to get more information about this.
Just I see Councillor Clayton and then Mayor Given, please.
Mayor Given, if your comments are on Councillor Bressey's, okay, thanks. Director Manuel, can you tell me more on the purchase of the additional properties? Was administration part of the conversation, and were we aware that Canadian Mental Health was going out to buy these properties and their intent, or was this something that we weren't included in regards to their plans?
Through the chair, it was a surprise to administration. We only recently learned of the purchases not too long ago, so we hadn't been involved in discussions around the future plans of those specific lots. We have been aware of CMHA's desire to submit a housing project forward, but it wasn't necessarily part of these purchases.
Thanks.
Mayor Given?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Pilat. Yeah, I think, this is the first time council seeing this request. Like any request, it would make sense to refer it to administration for review and provide back options. And, the options can include, do nothing, current situation's fine, and here's why. And another option could be if council wishes to support the request, here's how council could do that, and I guess the observation that I would make is without any additional information, it looks like the request, just really roughly, 86,000 by 32 units. There's that's a pretty low cost per unit, request or opportunity that the city might have to provide some stimulus funding to get this project further along. I think if somebody else came to us and said, "Hey, we need a couple of things," and maybe I didn't use my calculator right, but roughly looking, it's we need $2,600 per unit to move this thing forward. I think that would be the kind of thing that council would be really interested in. And I think a first step in exploring that is asking administration to provide a report back on the request and potential options. So I'd be happy to make that motion. At least it gets the discussion going, and council will be in a position to respond to the request with full information in front of them.
So were you looking at making a motion?
So I'll move that committee direct administration review the request and present options to respond to the request at a future committee meeting. Again, those options are pretty broad. They could be do nothing, do part, or fulfill the request and would provide council background information that's needed.
I think that's a fair motion to be making. I do have one question, just kind of follow up down thinking about Councillor Bressey. So we've had a lot of conversations about not having cluster developments of these kind of things. Are we concerned about more units going in that area? Because we had talked about not wanting to specifically not do more units in that area. I know these are a little bit maybe different type than some of the things we were looking at, but is there concerns from administration about this?
To the chair there, Mr. Pilat, there is actually 2 points. So in regard to your specific question, that's certainly a consideration when it comes to what the proposed tenancy is of the buildings, and we have some insight into that, and certainly it'll be subject to the development permitting processing. One thing that should be noted is administration will need to turn this around pretty quick, probably by the next committee date, in that you'll see in the request that the CMHA intends to pursue federal rapid housing funds, which is the other request we've seen recently come forward, which has the deadline of the end of December for submission.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions, Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the mayor's motion. I think that the more housing we can get for those special needs, the better. And like the mayor mentioned, the cost is minimal to the city at this point in time. Okay. Thank you.
Fair enough, fair comments. So seeing no other ones, I'll just, we'll bring Mayor Gibbons' motion. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously, so thank you for that. And I guess we'll keep you there, Director Manuel, if you could please update us on the outstanding items list.
Certainly. So I propose that item 1098, food truck permitting, be removed from the list. The other items, we'll go down to 1119. And 1119 is the affordable housing proposal from the Chamber of Commerce. That's being rolled together with a number of other affordable housing asks that have been made to administration, and we intend to present that at the December, it would be December 8th committee meeting. So I'm going to ask that we revise the date there, and everything else remains on track as presented.
Okay, thank you for that. Any discussion on the outstanding items, Councillor O'Toole?
No discussion, but if they're ready for a motion, I can make that motion to update the outstanding items list as and then make the amendments as required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor O'Toole. All in favor on that? And and that passes unanimously as well. And so I'm just going to make a suggestion. That's the end of our committee meeting, but it's 11:20. If we could maybe take a 5-minute break before, if 5 minutes is enough, or maybe 10 minutes. What are we looking for? 5 or 10 minutes here, group? 5's good. Okay, so we'll make a 5 minutes recess, and we'll pop back and keep continuing on with our committee meetings. Thank you.
It's not far away, you can work out from there. I'm saying you're not far away, you can work from there. Yeah, that's mine, yeah. Okay. Where's Jackie? Should we start it? All right. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, we are all here now, and we'll start the Cooperative Service Committee meeting again today, which is Mayor Gibbon, Kevin O'Toole, and Friesen, and myself, and all the councillors are here. Let's start it with 101 with the director, Shane Brook.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. Finance has had our external auditors in with them the last week to begin some internal field work preparation for our year end. So for finance, they don't get a break after budget. They move right into actually almost a busier season for them. At the next council meeting, we will be bringing the annual fees and charges report as well as budget approval. So that'll come up next week. Human Resources is moving this month from our paper-based red binder process, which takes care of all of our health and safety incidents, as well as required training. So we're moving that from a paper, literally red binder in every department across the organization to a digital cloud-based platform, which for city staff is an extremely exciting move. Procurement is moving forward with our plan to roll out our largest ever capital program for 2021. A highlight is that we've already moved on 6 projects that are time-based related to the stimulus, ISIP, and MSP program. So 6 of them have already gone to market here already. And with IT, I've been working with them to review our current cybersecurity threat response plan. We do have one in place, but it's something that I think is due for a refresh. So that is something I will keep committee updated on as we proceed. And with that, that's all I have to report this morning.
Thank you, Shane. Is there any question for update? I don't see anybody, so let's move on to 1.221 budget improvement area budget review. Scott Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. So before you this morning is the 2021 Downtown Association budget.
And in accordance with bylaw C 801 subsection 9, council must set the time and place when the BIA budget will be reviewed by council and prescribe the method by which businesses in the area will be notified. And in the past, notification has been sent by letter to the members, and along with that letter, we also include a copy of the proposed budget. The board of the BIA has submitted their 2021 budget to the city, and a copy of that is included in the report for your information. This budget will be presented to the membership of the association at their annual general meeting on February 24th, 2021. Also within the report, you'll find the previous 4 years of budget amounts, as well as the new 2021 budget amount of $302,507. This new budgeted amount is considerably lower than previous years, and I'll provide a brief explanation as to why that is. So the 2021 budget has been decreased as the province of Alberta has announced that they'll no longer contribute to the BIAs, as they're considering themselves exempt from the tax. So instead of the remaining businesses being impacted by a significant increase to make up that difference, the Downtown Association has made the choice to decrease their budget by a similar amount that the province would have contributed in 2020. So with that, I ask council to set a date and time to review and adopt the 2021 BIA budget and set the method by which the businesses in the zone will be notified. And just in closing, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And I also believe Ms. Wendy Bosch with the Downtown Association is also available if you have questions regarding the budget directly.
Thank you, Scott. Is there any question? Dylan?
Great, thank you. I actually have a question for Ms. Bosch, and that is just about with the province deciding not to pay property taxes. That's a 20% hit on your budget. That is pretty significant. Could you just share with us a little bit about how your organization's absorbing that? What's changing in the services you're going to offer because of that change?
Scott?
Good morning, through the chair. Well, it is significant. It's a significant dollar value. It's nearly $60,000. And in a modest budget, $60,000 matters. I would say the majority is coming out of beautification. Almost every budget line has been affected. However, beautification is the main source, basically because we've done the revitalization through the core, through phases 1 through 3 now, and then 4 coming up this year, this next year. So what once was and how things used to look aren't necessarily what they're going to look like in the future. You know, we're modernizing, things are changing in regards to how we present our core, and that ties into our rebranding and our urban vision.
Great, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that.
I can tell you that anything past this will take away from our community in regards to what we can offer. Right now, we've absorbed it on nearly every aspect of this budget, but that's it. There's no more.
Good. Is there any other question? If there's none, can get motion. Kevin, too?
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'll make a motion and start off with the recommendation. Number 1, I move the council review the and approve the 2021 Business Improvement Area budget in council chambers on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 3 p.m. as presented.
Is there any comments on the motion? Question? None? All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you, Kevin.
And I move the second recommendation that I move the council direct administration to notify the businesses within the BIA of the above date by letter, accompanied by a copy of the proposed 2021 BIA budget.
Motion on the table. Any questions? Go ahead.
Thanks, Chairman Huss. Just one thing, I think for our recording secretary, we might not be able to see the vote in the council chambers. We should just note that that was unanimous, that last vote, and just they're trying to record who voted for what. And so all 4 committee members were unanimous on that last one. And for the chair, I suppose we should sort of report that as Councillor Pilat was doing after each vote, sort of who voted in favor or if it was unanimous with all committee members.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. All in favor? Carried.
So that was Eunice Friesen, Mayor Given, Yad Minhas, and Kevin O'Toole. Voted unanimous.
What's next? Oh, go ahead, Dylan.
Sorry, just one more question. I'm just curious, so this is probably for Ms. Bosch again too. I'm just curious, are your members aware of the provincial changes that have happened? Is that something that would be just the board and the very involved members would be aware of? Or do you think all your members would be fairly aware of that?
Well, we've done both. Initially, it went through the board. We wrote a letter to our municipal partners as well as ministers and MPs on the behalf to advocate for the membership. The membership is also aware through our email system that we are losing nearly 20%.
Okay, great, thank you.
But they also know that we won't impact their, we won't increase their BIA levy. It's not fair.
Great.
Thank you. Is there any other question? We'll move to the next one. Good, thank you. So we move it to 1.3, Enterprise Resources Planning Implementation. We need more information, and this is Kendra, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the request of Council during the recent budget deliberations, administration has provided additional information on the Enterprise Resource Planning Project, otherwise known as ERP, prior to proceeding with the implementation. So as a quick reminder, an ERP is a business process management software that allows us to use a system to integrate applications to manage the business and automate many business background functions. So this system would include finance, human resources, and procurement processes, information related to the operational impacts, the risk and budget impacts associated with the status quo versus an ERP implementation has been provided in the staff report. While an ERP implementation is the most costly of the two options, it will provide opportunity for risk mitigation, optimization of operational efficiency, and improved access to more reliable and complete data to support evidence-based decision-making. So in collaboration with MMP, we completed a detailed analysis of our processes and requirements for an ERP system to ensure we captured the full scope of cost at the onset, minimizing the probability of budget overruns. The cost highlighted in the capital budget is a high-end estimate based on our specific requirements at the city, actual implementations of similar scope within other municipalities, and the experience and expertise of MMP. So today I also have on the line with us Elizabeth Banan, who is with MMP, and will also be available to answer any questions that may be more suited for the consulting firm. And with that, I would be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Kendra. Any question? Wade?
Thanks, Chairman Huss. Thanks for bringing this report to us, Kenza. I know I'd asked about this because I had concerns about it, and you know, after seeing it, I'm still having concerns. I think I have a better understanding of what the goals are with this, but just one of the things that concerns me from seeing the report, probably even more now, is that it's actually going to cost us about $500,000, $600,000 more a year as an organization to have this. And I thought the purpose was to try to find efficiencies. So can you explain to me, just was the $600,000 additional that would have just status quo versus implementing this, is that already factored into our budgets for 22, 23, 24, and 21, 22, 23, 24 calendar years?
Yes, the full cost of implementation of this system, which will take a 3-year time period to implement, is built into the capital budget. So that capital budget includes the cost of implementation along with the software cost for that system.
Okay, and just a couple more questions if I can, Councillor Munoz. Just, I guess what I mean, I don't fully understand it. I've done a lot of research trying to Google, trying to understand what ERPs do, but I'm really struggling with the cost. I'm really struggling with the cost of $6 million, $7 million, or 6.1 million more than status quo, and then additional costs from that. I guess, again, the reason I wanted to have more of a conversation is how do we safeguard our community that this is actually going to have the outcomes that we hope it's going to have? And what do we look at reporting? I think that, Councillor Friesen might have mentioned this as well at one point, is what's the reporting look like so we can ensure that we're actually seeing this be achievable? I guess if you could just walk me through, what do you see that looking like moving forward, of how reporting would come to council to show how effective this has been, or maybe we need to abort at some point?
So to speak to the cost component that you had referenced and the variation there, there is a significant difference that is accurate. However, this is a much more advanced system which would have significant integration across the 3 different areas. And in some areas, it is an advancement to systems that we don't even have. So it's integration of systems that currently do not exist. So naturally, our costs would be higher in relation to that. As far as the reporting back, there is a estimated impact of between 8,000 to 10,000 hours annually based on our analysis of our processes in conjunction with MNP, the consulting firm, that we anticipate we will see as time savings as a result of the efficiencies that we will see within the processes. That can be reported. We can report back to committee on that. However, it is, we don't anticipate that will translate into staffing reductions, for example, which is what we would, at the onset, this is a 3-year time frame. It's not something that we would see an immediate impact on. However, over the course of the implementation, and as we start to realize more and more benefits associated with the implementation of the system, it is something that we anticipate will allow us to contain our labor footprint into the future.
And just one last question, if I can. Just, is there a point, I guess, in a year from now, can we abort this? If we get into this for a year and we say, hey, it's, great in principle, just not seeing the benefit that we thought we were going to see within the organization, is there, or are we, once we move forward, is this a 3-year commitment minimum, and then we decide at that point whether it was effective or not?
I would say to realize the full benefit of implementation and the benefits that would come with integration, it would be advised to complete the full integration over the 3-year period. It would be challenging to identify the full scope of impact just after a 1 year into the implementation. It is, just to put it into perspective, the finance module alone will take 2 years to implement. So aborting that at a 2-year or a 1-year time frame would not help us, would not allow us to be able to report back on the efficiencies gained.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Wade. Thanks, Karina. Dylan, next question.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions is, one, the report makes reference to this platform could allow for future digital services for citizens, and I'm just confused by that. When I've been thinking about this, it seemed like it's an internal thing where if it helps us with input, this helps us with efficiency. Sure, indirectly, residents would see benefit from it, but the report made it sound like there might be some direct services residents might see. Am I interpreting the report right, or am I misunderstanding it?
Through the chair, that is a accurate interpretation. So ideally, what we would see into the future is an integration of our CRM system. So you'll recall not too long ago, we presented to committee on the intention to move forward with a case management system, which is a low-grade CRM essentially, that allows us to connect with our customers, provide responses to service requests, and for them to be able to access information so on their own. So we would look forward to the integration of that type of a system in with the ERP into the future. In addition to that, We also have our asset management area that we'll be looking to explore potential technical solutions to help us more effectively manage our vertical and linear assets into the future. And we would also look to integrate that into the ERP system when we move forward with that implementation.
Great, thank you. Then the one other one I have, I don't know if it's not so much a question as a comment. I noticed that in the business case, there's under efficiency services, there's an estimated 8,000 to 10,000 hours saved annually. So that's 4 to 5 jobs, and all of a sudden, if those are factored into the cost, well, it's a lot less. It's a lot less net expense if that gets factored in. But it's just one little line in this report, and I think that that's something that I'd like to understand more as we're moving forward. Is just on what basis is that efficiency estimation being made? How are we seeing it's going to contain workforce? It's one of those things where we've got a pretty high degree of trust in administration as it moves forward, but it's also a $7 million significant thing that has impacts not just for our council, but hopefully for councils 15 years from now. It's lasted us a long time, and so it's one of those things that I would like to understand a little bit more how we see those savings and how reliable our estimates are.
Through the chair. Absolutely. That was one of the pieces that we wanted to ensure we did a thorough job on at the onset. We wanted council to have a very clear and I guess as transparent view of what the cost would be of this system as well as the impacts of implementation. So that's why we engage with MNP to complete a thorough review of all of our processes within the 3 identified areas. So the consulting firm worked with staff on our end that actually complete those processes on a daily basis, identified what impact an ERP would have upon the current processes, and then calculated that out to demonstrate how many hours we could potentially save over the course of or into the future, I guess, in relation to those processes. That so it is a very detailed analysis. I would say it's not something that was just kind of pulled together as an estimated number. Again, that being based on the information from our staff around the processes, the knowledge of MNP in relation to ERPs and how their functionality impact our processes, and what we will be looking for going forward into the future as part of the ERP system. So those are fairly well thought out estimations of impact to efficiency.
Ellen, any more? No. Thank you, Karina. Any other question? If it's not, can I get a motion, please?
Yeah, I can give the motion. I move that the committee receive the additional information for the implementation of an enterprise resource planning, which we've been talking about is the ERP software, as requested during the 2021 capital budget deliberations.
Motion on table, Wade.
Thanks, Councillor Minhas. I'm not a voting member on this the committee, but I guess for me, I was hoping, and I appreciate this coming forward, but it actually makes me more concerned that we're doing this than before, even and on the numbers basis. When I look through the thing and all the things it says it's going to do, I guess my natural reaction is I would have hoped those were being done already inside the organization. I'm not sure how a plan over here makes this all happen now, but I guess for me, I'd certainly like to see a quarterly update on this and start seeing whether this thing's working. I appreciate we have to see it all the way through for 3 years, but for the next council coming in, if there's not some kind of efficiency savings within a year, I don't think it's too much to say we should abort and move on. If we're not seeing quarterly statements that start showing us wins, the wins should come easier in the first year than the third year. So if we're not seeing some serious wins in the first year, I guess for me, I just want to know if there's an ability to not continue on with this. And I'm not sure if administration can answer that. If we go a year and say, yes, ideally it would be better to go 3 years, but a year into this, if we're just not seeing the efficiencies through a quarterly reporting, can we abort the plan?
Thank you, Wade. So you're looking for if somebody can amend the motion to do?
No, I'm just looking for clarification. If a year from now, if through quarterly reporting we're not seeing the wins that we were hoping to see for the costs, because it's saying efficiencies, but it's actually adding $600,000 a year to our budget. So that seems counterintuitive to efficiencies to me, but I'm just wondering if administration can speak to if a year from now we're not seeing some significant wins from this major program, will we have a check-in point a year from now to see do we need to continue on with this or not?
I request to speak, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I will provide a little bit of a 60,000 foot level view on the ERP system. It is certainly a complex matter. However, we have been doing extensive research, and we are reaching a point as an organization of our size and complexity where we need to move into this. So my 60,000 foot level view on this is, many years ago, we were all operating with typewriters, right? Then one day we all have seen a Commodore 64 computer. And then we went into a Commodore 128 computer. Then we moved into PCs. Then we started integrating personal computers into networks. And then we have servers, and when we have clouds, and then we have internet, and the level of complexity on the systems became really, really interconnected. So this is pretty much what we're seeing right now in the city as we grow and we reach a level of complexity and size. It's a $250 million organization between operating and capital programs, where we need to move into an ERP system, because the standalone systems we have right now will become obsolete in the very near future. So we're not having typewriters right now in the city, but we are in an era that we're still doing paper-based employee files and other things we mentioned during our budget deliberations. So the level of complexity really is demanding this kind of system. So we can pull analytics, we can pull reports, we can be more efficient in our background integration, but also on the customer service side. So it's a very complicated thing, but I think it's a natural progression as a city as we grow, and we're becoming. I'm always saying we're in our teenager years as a city. We're moving from a smaller city to a big one, and at our size, we're going to be 100,000 people in the future, and all municipalities and private corporations, pretty much of our size, they have implemented ERP systems, or they are in the process of implementing this. So this is not unique to us. It is it's pretty normal, I would say, for our size and complexity. So yes, the systems are expensive, totally correct. But I think it's part of doing business and to have better integration and better service internally and also for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Horacio. Jackie, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Has CAO Galante or Ms. Trim, can one of you let me know in regards to other mid-sized cities across Canada or in Alberta that are using similar systems, the actual efficiencies that they've found over time with programs that are similar?
I can speak briefly to that. It may also be something that our consulting firm can add more context to, because they've done a lot of the reaching out to other municipalities and would be familiar around what the efficiencies would be gained in other areas as a result of the work they've done with some of those municipalities. When we did connect with some of the municipalities that have already implemented this system, we were seeing similar gains. And like I said, the estimations that MMP has provided is based on their work with other municipalities that have implemented similar systems in the past and what those impacts have been for them as well. So that's a part of the background for those estimations for sure. And like I said, we wanted to understand what it looked like for those municipalities as well as what it would look like for us looking at our specific situation. So Ms. Van Ann, I'm not sure if there's something you would like to add to that piece.
Thank you, thank you, Kinza, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, in the work we did with the City of Grande Prairie, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. We took a very conservative view of potential efficiencies, and as Kinza has already described, we worked at a very detailed level, looking at specific processes and evaluating those processes for their potential for improvement, be that automation of existing processes or creation of new processes where processes don't currently exist. In looking outward at other municipalities, the actual benefits realized by municipalities as they implement these types of systems usually falls between, I think, 75 and 85% of the projection. And in our work on the business case, we actually use, I believe, 75% of the estimated efficiencies as our metric for that projection for Grande Prairie. And municipalities and private sector organizations similarly find that there is, the benefits that they realize and the efficiencies that they gain really have to do with the speed of business processes. So something that a process that might take a day or two currently might be completed in hours, or processes that are completed in weeks may be completed now in days. The other, major benefit that organizations receive from these types of implementations, and it really speaks to some of the conversations this morning at this meeting, is to be able to provide you with much better data, much more accurate data, much faster than you're currently able to access information. Your current administration, are doing excellent work, but they are saddled with some very old tools, and that makes things like providing you with reports and managing finances is very, very manual. And so the opportunity within ERP is to automate many of those processes, and allowing staff to spend time doing more higher value work for the city rather than just copying numbers from one spreadsheet to another.
Thank you. Yeah, any other? No. Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Huss. Yeah, I'll speak in support of the motion to receive for information. I think it's reasonable, given the magnitude of the project, for council to seek regular updates. I think administration committed to that and suggested they'd be able to do that on an ongoing basis. I think council will want to stay on top of the implementation. I guess the caution that I'd offer is that the implementation is 3 years, and after, at some point through that 3 years, we may start to see the early benefits. But I wouldn't expect to see any in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter of the first year. They certainly will be over time. This is for the implementation of the system, and then the benefits would start to follow after that. The other observation that I'd make is it seems to me like this is one of those situations where I think often we think of improvements in these kind of systems as offering increased efficiency and cost savings. I think that's true, and some of the items that Councillor Bressey referenced, it will deliver that over time. It seems like the other major driver is the opportunity for increased effectiveness, so that the city operations can be more effective in what we do, less prone to risk and exposure to systems that don't talk to each other, less risk from cyber intrusions, as we heard Director Bork sort of reference the ongoing work in that area. And a greater ability to serve council when council looks for information. This council has been very focused on ensuring the operation of the city works on good data. And we've, I think, found that challenging to find the good data over the course of this term. And my understanding of the project is to put the systems in place that will allow administration to have good data at their fingertips on an easy to access basis. We've heard on a whole bunch of different issues from time to time over the course of this term where administration said, well, we can find that, and it means going through reams and reams of paper and spreadsheets to try to put things into place. My understanding of these types of projects is that, just as we heard from the MNP representative, that those types of projects, rather than being manual, labor-intensive things that take somebody's time over a number of days, that it, something somebody can sit down at a computer and punch in and then it spits it out. That would be an ideal state so that future councils are served by a more effective administration that mitigates some of those risks. You would hope that there would be an increased efficiency and cost savings, but I think that there's sort of two sides of the balance sheet there, that effectiveness has to be appreciated, and we should assign some value to that, even if it's more difficult to quantify.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll give an update. Jackie, go ahead.
Thanks, Chairman. Has a question for Director Bork. I'm wondering, I obviously can't vote at this committee, but I'm wondering if you can identify some specific process changes that we'll see as a result of this.
Go ahead, Shane.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. So part of the work that MNP has been doing is reviewing a number of our processes, but just to give a few examples of some of the current processes that exist, and these aren't looking at the one-off information requests, but I think to give council some context, really we're relying on our really great team to make this thing work. And I hope you've noticed over the last year a whole bunch of different processes that have changed and information that we'll be able to provide. But three examples that I think illustrate where we are right now are our quarterly and annual financial statements. We build them in Excel. We don't have the ability to generate a simple income statement or balance sheet from a report. So we have dedicated resources that build this in Excel, and there's opportunity for error, but there also is it's an inefficient way to go. Another one is example you'll recall was our mid-year capital check-in. We don't have a robust system to look at capital spending versus budget. And so it really takes a team focused on doing that. And that's the work we did this year, was to focus some resources on cleaning that up. A third one is, and this is what goes to some of the customer services, accounts receivable. When we generate an invoice right now, we don't have an automated system to send that out to a customer. We generate the invoice, we save it, we draft an email, and then send it out to the customer. These are some inefficiencies that our staff make work, but there is ERP will make all of this better, more accountability, more automation, and less chance for error, and better service to the staff and to our customers. So those are a few examples of how we're currently making the system work.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, it's all in favor? Yeah, motion carried with all 4 members are in Governor Toole, me, and Bill Mayor Gibbon and Jason. Motion carried. Thank you. After that, now we got outstanding items. Shane, can you update, please?
Thank you, Chairman Haas. Just going to grab my... So the advocacy framework is on track. This will be a report that outlines how to look at some advocacy items for the remainder of this term and set up the next council on a process to look at advocacy priorities. Item 1125, we're going to bring back, we've added a date for January 19th for Scott to bring a future growth assessment forecast back. 1126 is now complete, and 1120 is on track for January 5th.
Thank you for update. Looking for motion. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd move we receive the updates to the outstanding items list as noted.
All in favor? Motion carries. With that one, we done for the cooperative society for the meeting. And next one is, I think, Dylan, you're in the hook. And go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Huss. Just looking around the room, are we okay jumping straight in, or do we need a break? Not seeing anybody jumping up saying we need a break, so let's jump straight in. Oh, and Councillor Friesen will... and
leaving too.
So, and then just a note for our recording secretary, the councillors Friesen, Minhas, and Clayton will be leaving for this meeting, and the balance of council will be here. So that's councillors Friesen, Minhas, and Clayton are excusing themselves. So I'll call to order the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting for November 24th. And item 1.1 is Director Service Area Update, and that is Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. We'll start off with economic development. We've received 4 new applications for the local marketing grant. And as well, we are currently accepting applications for the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and those the application period ends on November 30th. So if you know anybody who might be interested in serving on that committee, please ensure that they put their application in. In energy and environment, for the Eastlink combined heat and power unit project construction timelines have been adjusted slightly, and the work will begin at Eastlink on January 4th, and the project is still scheduled for full commissioning by the end of February of next year. In engineering services, all of our road projects are now wrapped up. If you've been on the old bypass or 108th Street, you'll notice that 89th Avenue, the signals are back fully functioning, and the road is completely put back together. So thanks to all the contractors who I know had a challenging environment to work with on that project for getting that done. As well, traffic signal pole replacement work is underway with affected intersections. Will be put into flash mode during that time, so motorists are encouraged to use caution and follow the rules of the road in those areas. As well, the color palette used for the playground at TJ Gorman Park has been given to the students of Maud Clifford and Holy Cross to help design, and a presentation was created and shared with the schools as our public engagement, and the deadline for voter decisions is November 27th. In transportation, we haven't triggered residential snow removal with our contractors. However, we are utilizing city crews to go out and pick up a few of the trouble spots in some of the areas of the city. So I know today they were in the normal area that we would have contractors in for Tuesdays, dealing with a few of those issues. As well, all windrows will be picked up by the end of the day today. In parks, we continue work on the Oval Rink, and all rinks are set to be open before Christmas. We are getting a little bit of challenging ice-making weather with the temperatures being a little higher than normal. We've had over 20 neighborhood rinks that have been delivered to residents across the city. Artie, our robot, is working at the Community Knowledge Campus over the winter. We'll be using them for pathway removal, as well as removing snow on the artificial turf. And we're going to test them out on the speed skating oval for clearing snow on there as well. And I know one of the goals that we have with this technology is not just to put it in one place, but it's to test the technology out on diverse environments throughout the city to try and test the capability as we look at these types of investments over the longer term. And with that, that's my report.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Great, I'm not seeing any. So with that, we'll move on to item 1.2, which is 92 street upgrades, and that is Mr. Hinton.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. 92nd Street between 68th Avenue and 84th Avenue is a real road that reflects past construction practices. Administration reviewed and identified potential upgrades at 2 intersections. Helix Engineering was engaged to provide a high-level design and cost estimate for the 2 intersections. This work will bring the road up to current construction practices and to improve the road safety and commute time. Potential upgrades on attachment 1 for the 72nd Avenue and 92nd Street intersection show a southbound left turn is shown, along with the dedicated southbound through lane that will allow the through traffic to continue without being impeded. This additional lane will tie into the dedicated right turn lane for the southbound traffic heading west along 68th Avenue. A dedicated northbound right turn lane has been included. This will be used as a temporary transit stop in the short term until the area further develops. Street lighting has also been included in this intersection with a Class D cost estimate of approximately $610,000 for the work at this intersection. Potential upgrades shown on attachment 2 for the 80th Avenue and 92nd Street intersection show a dedicated southbound left turn lane with the southbound through lane allowing traffic to continue unimpeded. Street lighting has also been included at this location. The Class D cost estimate is approximately $365,000. Funds from the Intersection Improvement Program from the 2021 capital budget be utilized for this project with design in 2021 and construction in 2021 and 2022. I'm here today to recommend committee accept this report for information. If this report is accepted, the capital budget is approved as proposed. Administration will proceed with the shown improvements. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Chair Bressey, and thanks, Mr. Hinton, for presenting that. I'm excited that we will hopefully get some upgrades to 92nd and 72nd and 72nd Ave. I guess for me, just one comment of driving that area quite often and having lots of constituents wanting this. I'm probably not in support of us needing to go ahead with street lighting in either one of those locations. I think for me, I'm happy we're going ahead with both, potentially going ahead with those locations, but you know, at a cost savings of $312,000, if we don't put the lights there, I guess that's something that I'd want to support. I'm not a voting member of this committee, so I'm not sure how that looks. But for me, I think I appreciate us having the opportunity to do those. I don't know if we need to spend that kind of money on the lighting at this point.
So, and I think, Mr. Hinton, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is if council takes no other action other than receiving for information, and that includes approving our capital budget at our next council meeting as is, my understanding is that means that if we take no action, my understanding is that means the intersections will be upgraded, but there won't be any street light upgrades happening. Is that correct?
Well, currently right now in the cost estimates for the intersections, we do include lights, not traffic signals, but just lighting for the intersection themselves. We haven't included the whole corridor, although there's a price there for it, but we weren't looking at doing the whole corridor from 68th to 84th.
Gotcha. So then those lights that you'd be putting in the intersections, would those be throwaway costs when it gets twin two, or would it just be corridor lights if you did them would be throwaway costs?
There's a potential for those lights that we do, that we have to be relocated as well, so there would be an additional cost later for those to be relocated.
Gotcha. Do we understand what that cost might be?
It depends on future right now, so it'd be about the same cost as what the to put them in right now would be approximately the same.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pilat.
So I guess just a question for administration on that is, if we didn't want to go ahead with streetlights, how would council be able to weigh in on that if we were just talking about when this comes for capital? Would that be just a discussion when it gets to council then?
That is something that we can definitely consider once we get into the final design stages and see where we are for costs. We can look at including or excluding them at that time.
Okay, that would be, for me, that would be a great conversation to have. I haven't had, and maybe from this report we'll get more conversation about it, but I haven't had anybody concerned about lighting. It's just been more about turning lanes and access into those areas. It hasn't been around lighting. So I appreciate the report.
Mayor Given.
Yeah, I think I agree with Councillor Pilat. I've heard a few people talk about lighting, but it's not sort of the driving, the main concern with respect to this road. But Mr. Hinton, I just wanted to clarify sort of my understanding here. There's one line under street lighting that seems, so it's in the report, it says the street lighting project is not being planned for completion. And then, as they need to be moved. And so if council takes no action, it sounds like administration won't do the street lighting. It will make the intersection improvements. Is that correct? Like, we don't need to make a motion to exclude something that administration isn't proposing to do. Is that a correct interpretation?
And I think I see Director Glavin, so I'll hand it to him.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. Yeah, Mayor Given's interpretation is correct. We plan to do the intersection upgrades, but we were not planning to do the street lighting for the corridor. There may be associated street lighting at the intersection specifically for pedestrians, but it was not the intent to do the entire corridor with street lights.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Director Glavin. Yeah, so my read of the report is, administration, you know, if council passes the budget at our next council meeting, administration will undertake this, and the only sort of council could either say, no, don't make those intersection improvements, which administration looks like they're going to move forward with, or please do add lights, which administration looks like they weren't going to do. But other than that, if we approve the budget, it sounds like the intersection improvements will happen and the additional street lighting won't. And so I'm really happy to, I think this is the kind of information that council was used to seeing before when we were more directly involved in award of tender of projects. I think this is the kind of information that I'm sure lots of us will be happy to pass on to residents that travel that road often, say, hey, 2021 looks like intersection improvements are coming. It's going to be safer to travel. So I appreciate seeing the detail.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressey. Thank you very much, Director Glavin and Mr. Hinton. I hear what you're saying, Bill, and I noticed that too, but I had it double catched because in the summary conclusion it actually says, in my interpretation of it, something entirely different than what you just discussed. And that's in that one sentence. It says that along 92nd Street, it proposes that 72nd and 80th Avenue intersections along 92nd Street be brought up to current construction practices by adding left turns and street lights at the intersections using the 2021 intersection improvement program. So I guess I'm just still looking for a little bit of clarity because I'd hate to send this forward to administration under this assumption and then we have these costs come back as well, because there's two things that are being said in this report that I feel kind of contradict each other.
So I think what I'm hearing, Director Lavin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what my understanding now is if council doesn't give any specific direction, then we'll see intersections, including lights at intersections put in, but we won't see any traffic lights along the corridor put in. So if council is okay with that, then we could just receive this report for information. I think if I'm understanding correctly, the two things council could direct to do potentially if it wanted to would be either to say, hey, we want you to actually put in more street lights, so please also add lights along the corridor. Or council could say, don't put lighting in these intersections, just improve these intersections. But if we do the status quo, the intersection upgrades along with lights would be what is happening. Is that correct, Director Glavin?
That's correct. And to just be specific on the streetlights, so the streetlights that would be put in at the intersection would just be for like pedestrian purposes to safely cross the intersection. What you wouldn't see with this is you wouldn't see streetlights between the intersections, so that, 200 to 400 meters between intersections, you wouldn't see us light the road as you would in any other. It would remain the same. Only at those intersections would you see any additional lights, and only just at the intersection.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pilat.
Okay, so thanks, Chair Bressey. So thinking I understand the clarification a little bit more, for me, I think if we were to move forward, I'd prefer to remove the $156,000 from both locations and not do the lighting. And my reason for that is there's no path on the other side of the road. There's no path to the west side of the road on here. It's all on the east side. I don't know what the lighting is going to do to help pedestrians at that point. There's already lighting at the very corner of 68th or 72nd Ave, which is where the concern, I guess, residents have said to me. I'm just not sure why lighting up those intersections specifically, which could potentially be throwaway costs, would be something we need to do at this point. So I guess if you're going to pulse check or if this comes back to council, for me, I'd love to see the intersection improvements, but not the street lights at those two intersections specifically. That would be my opinion on it.
Councillor Thiessen.
There you go. My button wasn't working for some reason. No, I totally 100% agree with Councillor Pilat being someone who drives that road every single day. There is no pedestrian pathway on the west side of the road of 92nd. It's all east lane sidewalks and bike trails and stuff like that goes across. So to add lighting for pedestrian links that don't exist currently today seems like a big throwaway cost, especially when they're largely going to be staying on the east side of the street, unless they like to walk in the ditches of the city of Grande Prairie along our rural section roads. So I'm 100% in alignment with what Councillor Platt is saying, and so we've had this discussion in different parts of the community as well in regards to throwaway costs. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create an efficient and effective organization that spends its money wisely, and to throw in lights that mean well but don't do anything seems like an abject waste of cash. So thanks.
I guess a question I've got for
Councillor Bressey, I see Councillor Blackburn's.
Oh, my apologies, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I beg to differ on the reason for putting lights at those intersections. I really don't think, as others have said, that there's a need, or at least a great need to light it up for pedestrians. However, anybody who is driving and wanting to make a turn at any of those intersections will appreciate the lighting to ensure that they're watching for the right kinds of traffic, whether it be pedestrian or vehicular. I think lighting at intersections is a very important part of the safety for drivers just as much as it is for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies again, Councillor Blackburn. A question I've got for Mr. Hinton is, how does engineering decide when an intersection is worthy of that type of lighting or not? Is there national tax standards you're going after? Is there something else you're doing? Just how do you folks decide when a light is recommended in an intersection?
Thank you, Chair Bressey. Currently, right now, we rely on actual electric and tax standards to come up with some criteria for that. But yeah, right now, that's what we use.
And then, like other engineering decisions, would that include traffic counts have been done, a site study's been done?
Sorry, excuse me, can you repeat that question, sir?
So I know when we've talked about other intersection improvements such as crosswalks or traffic lights, we always talk about warrant scores, and those often include a traffic count of actual observation of the intersection, what's happening. Would that have happened at these intersections, or would those happen before lights went in?
Yeah, we would look at that for sure before lights went in.
Yeah, and I think my thinking is I really don't think that intersections improvements should be very micro and should be politicized at this level. I really think, my opinion, it really is that we should be trusting our engineers to suggest what kind of improvements are needed for safety. I'd also note that usually we're having the opposite conversation with our engineers. Usually we're saying, hey, we really feel that a traffic light should go here, or a lighted crosswalk should go here, or this kind of intersection should go here. And they're saying, whoa, 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 the warrants show that you don't need to spend that kind of money here. So that tells me that this isn't a department that's not looking at standards. It's not a department that, from my observation, is being super liberal with just throwing out money because they feel like it. I think we've seen them have evidence-based reasons for these, and so for that reason, I don't really want council getting into, hey, we think that these are the specific improvements that should happen here. I see Director Glavin, and then I'll have Mayor Given.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. And excuse me. I just want to make sure that it's clear that the $156,000 for lighting won't be spent, and any of the lighting costs we're talking about at the intersections are included in the intersection costs. So there is no plan to spend the additional $156,000. That was for the corridor lighting.
Great. Mayor Given.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. We're getting to a level of detail here that I think is maybe beyond where we need to be. And I'll go there because we have the drawings. If we look at the drawings, what we're talking about the intersection lighting improvements, if I'm understanding correctly, they're all on what I'll call the east side of the roads. There's nothing on the west side, so there's nothing there to help people cross the west side. That's actually not a part of the proposed plan, the intersection improvements. And it looks like we're, basically matching a similar design at each intersection, which provides additional lighting as people enter an intersection where they're making left-hand turns. And as we know, there's a high volume of left-hand turns at both these sites. They're certainly at 72nd Avenue. But from the renderings that we have in the package, we're talking about 3 additional light poles at 72nd Avenue, and I think it's maybe 5 light posts on the east side of the road at 80th Avenue. These are seemingly straightforward additions of lights. I would would take administration's advice, but, you know, being that they're on the east side, doesn't look like they'd need to be significantly relocated when we go to a 4-lane divided standard. I think that improving lighting down a otherwise dark stretch of road when people are coming to an intersection where they're making left-hand turns is a reasonable idea. And recognizing that those costs are included in the overall intersection improvements and not additional to the intersection improvements, I'd encourage council to support receiving this for information. And I'm not sure if that motion's been made yet, but I'd be happy to make that motion.
Great. So are you making the motion?
I do.
Awesome. So we do have a motion on the table. I also would note to council that if you look at the drawings and if you drive down there, there is an asphalt path there that people are walking along. So there is a path that we've presumably put there because people do travel up and down. It is just a note I would make to council. It's not just a ditch. Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. Just a question for administration then again, and you know, as we're looking at this, I mean, over time, we're probably going to add these, so maybe it isn't complete throwaway. I'm just wondering if there's a way we have money allocated in our budget every year for $1 million for land acquisition. I'm not assuming maybe we don't even need to acquire land here. These might be in right of ways, but is there a way that we can safeguard that these lights are just going in a location that these ones would never be moved? Am I understanding that correctly? Like these, if we did a road change, would these be able to be put in a location they would never have to move, even if we did curb and gutter in a road change? I'm not sure if that's for Mr. Hinton or Director Clavin, but just is there a way that we can safeguard that when we put these lights in, that we can put them in a location that they're not going to have to be removed at some point if we do twin the road or put curb and gutter in?
Mr. Hinton.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. Currently, for the two intersections, because we don't have all the right-of-way, especially at the 80th Avenue intersection, those ones would be most likely have to be relocated. But we would definitely try and do our best to put them in a location that would minimize the relocation cost.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, the 72nd Ave, which has really been the very topical one I think council's had, we'd probably find there. But the 80th Ave one, we might have to look at doing some improvements or getting some easement right-of-ways allocated. And I guess for me on that, if we're looking at moving ahead with this, I guess I'd just like to see us figure out if we could do that, and if it maybe put this project to 2022, maybe fair enough, because I don't know if this one's the bigger priority. I appreciate we have money set aside for it, but again, if we can eliminate throwaway costs, and if it's getting easement set up, is that something that we could do if it just allowed? Would administration just need more time to do that if that's all it took, was getting the easements set up?
I see Ms. Donnelly popping on.
Hi, through the chair. The improvements that are shown on here are all within land and property that we currently have. We won't require easements to do this. And the streetlights that are shown here are on the east side. That's what's currently proposed. When we get to detailed engineering, this is a high-level concept design. And when we get into detail, we will do our best to make sure that nothing that goes in is throwaway and that the lights are in a location that works. What happens to us is the final grades and elevation of the ground could change, but we would try and get them where we can keep them. You can see the existing ones at lights at the 72nd. We're able to continue to work with those, and so we would hopefully try and get the others in a location that works. But that is really getting into quite a level of detail that we didn't go into because this is still conceptual.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? We do have a motion on the table to receive for information, so I will call that to question. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. And then with that, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Hinton. We appreciate the report. And with that, we will move on to item 1.3, which is Bike Skills Park, and that is Mr. Carroll.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council has previously approved the construction of a bike skills park in the north part of the city, which would be funded from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID-19 Resiliency Stream. Administration has reviewed several possible locations and decided on 2 possible sites in the Crystal Lake Park area. Both locations were part of a public consultation survey, and administration received the results and comments received, and decided to move ahead with the proposal of site number 1, which is the north site, as the location of the Bike Skills Park for construction to start in the spring and to be completed in 2021. And so that's the report, and any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thiessen, and then I've got one.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressey, and thank you very much, Mr. Carroll. I actually agree with you in the Site 1 designation. I guess the tree hugger in me just is a bit concerned that we may have to take down any trees. I didn't see it in the pros or cons, but would we be able to maintain or retain most of the natural landscape surrounding this Bike Skills Park?
Yes, and that certainly is one of the criteria that we use to evaluate the 2 sites, that the development of this infrastructure will require minimal damage to the existing trees, and any trees that we do take are not valuable. They're more bush and that type of tree. The other site in site number 2 would involve significant removal of a heritage type tree. So we decided not to move ahead with that one.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for your consideration. I guess just a ballpark range. I know this is very, very preliminary, but would you say of that circle, sort of half of the circle is covered with trees? Would it be a minimal loss of trees? Are we talking a third, a half, a quarter, 10%? What do you estimate for that area that we might have to remove?
It's hard to throw an estimation out. We just put the circle on more to identify the area. But once we move ahead with the design concept, certainly keeping the removal of any type of tree would be a consideration as to keep those to a minimum.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you very much. I'll just throw in a little comment too. I know it'll be exposed to, I guess, the roadside if the committee and council choose this site. But I also look at those trees as being a very nice windbreak for any of the kids or people who might want to use that area, as well as flood mitigation as well. So we know that there's issues with Crystal Lake as far as its health, as far as being a viable wetland area. And I would like to do my utmost best to try to preserve it or improve it with whatever we put in there. So I thank you for your mindfulness.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressey. I guess I've read through the report. Thank you for that, Mr. Carroll. What I have trouble getting a sense of, because it's such an awful lot of reading, is how predominant were the comments from residents right opposite from this site regarding issues with unsightliness or concerns about noise, that kind of thing for site number
1? There was, obviously with any type of change of use, there are some concerns from some of the comments about, going from what it is now, which is really undeveloped parkland, to, a piece of infrastructure that will certainly have a higher degree of use and certainly a change of use. So there is those concerns, but I think evaluating it as a piece of infrastructure and a need for that area, certainly the comments in favor of this were very, very high, and people saw it as a useful piece of infrastructure that's going to get a high level of use and needed in the area.
Great, thank you. A question I've got is just one of the concerns that showed up a lot in the comments from residents that were opposed was concern about geese or other bird nesting habitat. I'm wondering if there's been any conversation with environmental stewardship or the province or anybody that would be knowledgeable about, are there concerns about this having a negative impact on our wildlife populations?
Yeah, certainly familiar with the nesting habitats in this area being if not part of it, certainly adjacent to Crystal Lake and all of the environmental impacts that will be considered. If it is approved as the site to locate, we will certainly consult with all parties and make sure that any disruption to the habitats or any of the infrastructure that's there will be either avoided or kept very minimal due to the sensitive nature of the area.
Great. Thank you. And also just one comment to administration, just noting in Site 2 in the cons that administration took note of the use of Site 2 by local Indigenous communities for sacred herbs. And I really appreciate that being recognized by administration and that being known. I think that's a big step forward in being aware of our community and in terms of reconciliation and the hopes and the hopes that this council has. So I just wanted to note that I really appreciate that appearing in this report. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I should have included this question in my last attempt. However, I'll ask it now. Given the restrictions we have regarding using the funds to create this this bike park, are there alternatives if neither Site 1 nor 2 are approved by council? Have we still got an opportunity to put a bike park somewhere in the north part of the city within the timelines that we're restricted to?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, we had looked at several other sites in the north part of the city for a bike park, and due to the ease of development and I guess the availability of land and proximity to the trail system and the surveillance aspect of it, in that it's the site number 1's in full view and not backing directly onto residential areas. These two sites rose to the top of the sites to be considered for an inclusion of a bike park. Any other parks, sites that we located and we considered, weren't as favorable based on the criteria that we used to evaluate these two.
Thank you. Mayor Given. Oh, sorry. Misinterpreted that. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. I'm prepared to make a motion. We can get on the floor here. I would move that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee recommend council approve Site 1 in Crystal Lake for the location of the Bike Skills Park.
Great. Thank you. We do have a motion on the table. Any conversation? Great. In that case, I will call to question. All in favor? And that is myself, Mayor Given, and Councillor Thiessen in favor. All opposed? And Councillor Blackburn opposed. Any further business with this item? Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Carroll. We appreciate your report and we appreciate your work. And with that, we will move on to item 1.4, our fees, rates, and charges bylaw, and that is Ms. Dennis.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. I'm going to just share my screen here with a presentation that I have. And everybody can see this? All right. So administration recommends that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee recommend council gives 3 readings to bylaw C-1395C, being an amendment to the fees and rates and charges bylaw. At the October 13th Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting, committee made the following motion. Committee direct administration to prepare amendments to the fees, rates, and charges bylaw C-1395 as per attachment A and return to a future committee meeting. Administration is proposing a simplified fee structure which reflects if the business is a resident, non-resident, or home occupation. Additionally, the proposed fee structure also includes new fees for a 3-day temporary license and a 3-month temporary license, as well as new charges for services not previously identified, such as late fees, certificate or permit replacement fees, and a license transfer fee. As the proposed business license bylaw C-1393 no longer identifies chauffeurs, taxis, limousines, or shuttle types of businesses. These fees were not included in this amendment, but will be further addressed at a later date. Administration is recommending reduced fees for all resident and home-based businesses in order to reduce the financial burden on local businesses. The proposed fee structure reflects scenario 1, where the resident fee is decreased from $105 to $25. The home-based business fee is decreased from $200 to $100, and the non-resident fee is increased from $420 to $525. Administration originally presented 3 different fee scenarios. However, after a brief discussion at the October 13th Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting, administration has included a 4th fee scenario. Administration is recommending an implementation date of May 1st of 2021 in conjunction with the implementation of the proposed business license bylaw C-1393. If a motion is made by committee to amend any portion of the proposed fee structure, administration will prepare the amendments prior to being brought forward to council for consideration. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. Thanks for the report. It was something I was hoping to have a good conversation before I come back to council. So thanks for having this on it. I'm just a couple of things for clarification for me. So currently, the residential fee of $100. How many of those would we be collecting a year on the report? It's 2,381. But are we collecting from 2,381 residents now for that $100 fee?
Thank you, Chair Bressey. So the home-based business fee right now is at the $200 rate, and we currently have 674 home-based businesses that we have licensed at this time.
Okay, and mine was more around the resident-based businesses of the 2,381. That's proposed at anywhere from $0 to, I guess, $50 on here. I think this was our hope to get every business to be signed up in the city at some point. So I'm just trying to get a sense of scale of how many are currently considered under the residential program.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. I do not have that information on hand, but that is something that I can gather for you.
Okay, that would be great. And I guess I'm also, if I can ask, what is the cost? And I appreciate trying to have different scenarios so that we can debate about them, but what's the cost to administer an invoice for the city of Grande Prairie? We're looking at 2 scenarios, one at $10 for scenario 2 and the scenario that administration is recommending at $25. I mean, would we break even on sending them out an invoice for the $25?
Thank you, Chair Bressey. So a straightforward basic application form for the certificate would be approximately $25. So that's with no hidden costs and just a basic application.
Okay, so I guess my question's more specifically, does the city as an organization know what it would cost us to send a bill to $2,381 and to collect and administer that payment? I'm just worried that the $25 isn't even a break even, to be honest. And so I'm just wondering if we have a sense of, is that a number that we're to charge businesses, but we're not even going to make actually any money on charging them by the time we collect it?
Ms. Dennis, I don't know if you've got that information of how much it would cost. I think the question is what the city's actual costs to sending an invoice and collecting a payment from somebody might be. I'm not sure.
This might be more of a Director Bork or maybe somebody from finance if they're on the phone. I appreciate that that's maybe not your area. I'm just kind of curious if it doesn't need to be here today, and I'm just throwing out for question when it comes to council, because it's going to come to council. It looks like either way that'd be something that I guess for me I would like to know the information on. So it doesn't have to be answered today. I'll leave it at that, and we can maybe just see if that's fine, if administration's comfortable just having something for when it comes to council.
Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. I can commit to look into that and report back when this comes before council.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
guess just one last, I guess for me, I'm not a voting member to this, but I will make it known now that for me, I wouldn't be supporting the fee structure one that administration's looking at advancing. I think there's a lot of merit to us having a business bylaw, and I really want to push for business bylaw because I think analytically it'll give us a lot of information. I'm just not thinking it's going to be a lot of fun phone calls to collect $25 from businesses that currently weren't paying. And I'm not sold on why we would even consider lowering home fees during these times. I don't think we want to promote more people working from home in these times. That may happen on its own, but I do want to remind us again of the bricks and mortar that pays for our roads and our police and everything else is our property taxes. So if we continue to make it easier for people to work from home and cheaper, it's not the direction I think our city should want to go. So for me, I wouldn't be looking at supporting anything other than scenario 4, and potentially been asking for an increase to the home fees past $200, which they previous were. So that's just my comment. So administration knows where I'm at for council, and kind of where committee knows when I'm at when it gets to council.
Great, thank you. I know for me personally, I'll support whatever motions get made at committee today, because I think this should go to council. But when it gets to council, I know where I'm at with this is I can't support any increases to any businesses this year anyways. I think that in general, I think there's a conversation to be had about how much should we collect from home-based, how much should we collect from non-residential businesses especially, but also should we collect some revenue from resident businesses. But I think this is the wrong year for that. You've got businesses that are dealing with tremendous financial pressure and other stresses, and I look at the $25 for a resident business, and I appreciate that that's a drop from what we used to charge resident businesses. But there's also a lot of businesses that didn't need a license before, so that is $25 that a lot of businesses didn't pay before that they would have to now. And even though it's not a significant amount of money, I think it is just one more fee in a hard year. And I think what that communicates to them isn't worth the revenue to me. So I know that I'll support sending whatever gets sent to council, but when it comes to council, I absolutely can't support increasing the fees to any businesses this year. Any other? Mayor Given.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. In an effort to move this forward, I'll make a motion that committee direct administration bring amendments to bylaw C 1395 to amend the fees for business licenses in accordance with the proposed fee scenario 4, period. In speaking to that motion, fee scenario 4 is the one that has a $0 fee amount for a typical resident business. It maintains, if I understand correctly, it maintains the current $200 home business license fee, so there's no drop in that, and does have, I believe, a slight increase to the non-resident business fee. I appreciate the discussion here. I think council will have to decide in the future how effective this implementation is if people don't assign a value to getting the fee. There's something about paying something, even if it's a nominal amount, that makes it feel more real. And so council, after the first year of implementation, and we see how signups go, and if we're getting, the number of businesses licensed that we desire, if we're not, then maybe a part of that is, maybe there just needs to be a bit of a money transaction. It should be as frictionless as possible, ideally paid online, so there is no invoicing, done electronically, and I think the city's progressing that way. So, in an ideal situation, you'd go to the webs, you'd get an email, you go to the website, you click in, you'd pay it, you'd get emailed your business license, and an email reminder would come in a year's time. And so very frictionless and low cost. That could evolve over time. I appreciate the arguments about now is not the time to be sending even sort of signals that we're looking to add additional cost to businesses. Although earlier this morning we had a conversation where we did specifically say we want to add additional cost to a certain kind of business. But I think that fee scenario 4 is the best way to move forward with the concerns that council raised, and implement a system where we can start to collect the data that I think we all acknowledge would be useful to businesses in the community. So I hope that committee members will support fee scenario 4 and will support this when it comes forward to council.
Thank you. So we do have a motion. Is there any conversation or debate about that motion? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I'm certainly in favor of the motion. I'd just like to point out one thing that we should consider about this. We're going to want business licenses in place, certainly because of the kind of information that will be provided and the benefits of that. If we don't have a fee associated with that, then the issue will be that we'll be having to do follow-up to get everybody to comply with the need to apply for a license, but with no compensation for that exercise. So it's just a consideration for us. I'm not going to use that as a reason to oppose the motion.
Any other conversation or debate? In that case, I will call it to question. All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Appreciate your work. And then just a note to our recording secretary, Councillor Pilat has left the meeting. Moving on, we have got, apologies, I got too many windows open. We don't have any other business, so we'll move on to bylaw and policy review, and that is Ms. Needham.
Well, sorry about that. I just tried to start my video. I apologize, and it doesn't seem to be working.
That's okay. We can hear you just fine.
There we go. I got it. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I am bringing bylaw C 1332 to committee for review. And this was one of a series of 3 to 5 bylaws and policies that were brought forth to be reviewed by the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee, and it's presented here with just minor revisions. It was last reviewed in 2019.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Is anybody prepared to make a motion? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressey. Thank you very much, Ms. Needham, for the report as well. I would move that committee recommend council give 3 readings to bylaw C-1332B, being an amendment to the Grande Prairie Cemeteries bylaw.
Great, and then I'm wondering, are you
I can read them both.
willing to chain the two together? I don't know if we need to split them up.
I can chain them up, yeah. And number 2, approve revisions to policy 608, being the memorial bench and tree policy.
Great, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Excellent. Well, then I will call it to question. All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. And Ms. Needham, thank you for your work, and thank you for being patient as we waited to get to you. And with that, we'll go to our outstanding items list with Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. So currently, the items that are scheduled for next committee meeting are on track. Although I will put it out there that the stormwater utility model may get pushed to the first meeting in January, but as of right now, we are on track to bring it to the next committee meeting. Today we heard for the items 1123 and 1105 that can be removed from outstanding items list.
Great, thank you. Could I get a motion? Councillor Thiessen. Oh, sorry, Councillor Blackburn.
I'll give it to Councillor Blackburn. Take it away.
Councillor Blackburn.
I'll move that we accept the outstanding items list as amended.
Great. Any discussion or debate? Not seeing any. I'll call it to question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. And with that, I will call our meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.